Chapter 1581. In the world of cultivators, news spread like wildfire. In just a day, all the sects in the Songlan dynasty knew what had happened. They knew that the Battle King sect had sent out 116 martial saints to attack the True Sword sect, and the True Sword sect had sent out 14 martial saints. In the end, the True Sword sect hadn't lost a single martial saint, while the Battle King sect had lost all their martial saints. The Battle King sect has lost all their martial saints. Got it. There's nothing strange about it. It's within our expectations. That was the first reaction many people had when they heard the news. Then they jumped to their feet and widened their eyes. Say that again. It's not that the True Sword sect was annihilated. It's that the Battle King sect sent out over 100 martial saints that died. What about the True Sword sect? What about the True Sword sect? The True Sword sect didn't lose a single martial saint. That's impossible. That's impossible. Is the news true? I saw it with my own eyes. When those who didn't see the battle with their own eyes heard the news, their first reaction was disbelief. The Battle King sect had sent out over 100 martial saints, while the True Sword sect had only sent out 14 martial saints. The difference in numbers was 10 times. Neither side had a single high-level martial saint, and the strongest was a peak 6-star martial saint. The Battle King sect had 5 martial saints, while the True Sword sect only had 1. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. The True Sword sect had overturned everyone's opinion. In the main hall of the ancient Mirror sect, everyone from the sect master to the elders was present. How did the True Sword sect kill over 100 martial saints from the Battle King sect? It's hard to believe without seeing it with my own eyes. The sect master of the True Sword sect is at the early stage of the first heavenly layer of the Aeon. But did you know that he was able to kill 98 martial saints from the Battle King sect as soon as he made a move? The lowest was a 2-star martial saint, and the highest was a 4-star martial saint. None of them survived. That's impossible. How can a 1-star martial saint kill a 4-star martial saint? I'm not the only one who saw it. Everyone in the ancient Mirror sect fell silent. It was already hard to believe that a 1-star saint could fight against a 4-star saint. A 1-star saint killing a 4-star saint was like a dream. A 1-star saint killing a 4-star saint instantly. Many second-rate, quasi-first-rate, and first-rate forces within the Azure Water Imperial dynasty first didn't believe it when they heard the news. Then they were shocked and fell silent. The Azure Water Imperial family also fell silent. A tall figure was sitting on the sect leader's throne within the War King sect's magnificent hall. He was looking down from above. His body unconsciously emitted a frightening aura that caused the air to tremble. Ripples spread out from his body. Below him stood more than a dozen golden-robed men and women. Among them, the devilish-looking man and the iron, tower-like, brawny man were among them. Counting from the right, the iron, tower-like, brawny man stood in second place, the devilish-looking man stood in third place, and the person standing in first place was an ordinary-looking, middle-aged man. He was neither fat nor skinny, neither tall nor short. His aura was restrained, and his eyes were ordinary. He was the kind of person that would be forgotten if he was placed in a crowd. However, if one were to look closely at his eyes, they would discover that there was a terrifying light in the depths of his pupils. It was as if there were 2 divine swords that could pierce through space and cut apart heaven and earth. Once they were released, it would definitely shake the heavens and earth. The 11th envoy and the 12th envoy are dead. The person on the throne spoke. His voice was like a great bell, causing the dozen golden-robed envoys below to tremble. The person on the throne only mentioned the 11th envoy and the 12th envoy. He didn't mention the other martial saints that had died because they didn't truly belong to the War King sect. The 7th envoy, the 11th envoy, and the 12th envoy's deaths are indirectly related to you, said the person on the throne. Sect leader, I didn't investigate the true sword sect's strength properly, which led to the 11th envoy and the 12th envoy's deaths. I am willing to accept the punishment, said the golden-robed man standing in 7th place. He looked a bit thin and weak. He immediately bowed. There's no need for the punishment this time. The true sword sect has hidden too deeply. I didn't expect it either. However, you still need to investigate the true sword sect's strength, said the person on the throne. Since my master came into being, you have all been nurtured by him. You have all been nurtured by him. You have all been nurtured for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. However, it wasn't easy to nurture each of you. The 11th envoy and the 12th envoy's deaths are very painful for me. It's also a loss for our sect. Therefore, you must investigate the true sword sect's strength before you act. Yes, sect leader, said the dozen golden-robed men. In their hearts, the sect leader was extremely dignified. His words were like an imperial edict. Our sect's expansion doesn't need to stop because of the true sword sect. Send out invitations to the other third-rate and quasi-second-rate forces. Those who don't accept it will be exterminated, said the person on the throne. Yes, said the reply in unison. It was even more forceful. The Battle King sect didn't immediately take revenge on the True Sword sect, which was within everyone's expectations. After all, after this battle, the True Sword sect's strength had become even more mysterious. They couldn't see through it. They didn't know if it was just like that, or if they had an even more powerful trump card. If they didn't know their trump card, they might just take revenge randomly. It might cause even greater losses. Of course, if the Battle King sect was willing to send out their strongest forces, they might be able to destroy the True Sword sect. However, they might also be destroyed by the True Sword sect. That would be a risky move. What the Battle King sect wanted was a stable and fast development. However, the Battle King sect's other action was out of everyone's expectations. Originally, some people thought that after the True Sword sect's losses, the Battle King sect would be quiet for a while. However, they didn't expect that other than not taking revenge immediately, the Battle King sect would still send invitations to the other third-rate and quasi-second-rate forces, asking them to submit. Within the Kanglin dynasty in the Black Cloud mountain range, there was an old and powerful quasi-second-rate force, the Black Cloud sect. The Black Cloud sect was created by the Black Cloud Sage 1,000 years ago. The Black Cloud Sage was a 7-star saint expert. Therefore, the Black Cloud sect was a second-rate force. However, ever since the Black Cloud Sage's death, the Black Cloud sect had never produced a 7-star saint expert. The most powerful one was only at the peak of the 6-star saint level. Therefore, the Black Cloud sect naturally fell from a second-rate force to a quasi-second-rate force. Even so, the Black Cloud sect still had a foundation that ordinary quasi-second-rate forces did not have. There were more than 26-star martial saints in the sect, and there were even 4 6-star martial saints at the peak. Other than the fact that they did not have a 7-star martial saint, the Black Cloud sect was not inferior to a second-rate force in any other aspect. Right now, the Black Cloud sect's sect master and various elders were present in the Black Cloud Palace. The Battle King sect is truly arrogant. They actually dared to extend their hands to our Black Cloud sect. An elder coldly snorted as he waved the golden invitation in his hand. I originally thought that the Battle King sect would be well behaved for a period of time after suffering a great loss at the True Sword sect. Looks like they're treating us as a soft persimmon and want to pinch us, said another elder. There were dozens of elders in the Black Cloud sect, and every one of them had extraordinary strength. Just thinking about it, there were more than 26-star saint experts. Adding the other saint experts, there were more than 100 of them. As long as a 7-star saint expert was born, the Black Cloud sect would immediately become a powerful second-rate force. The Battle King's golden invitation also gave the Black Cloud sect 3 days to prepare. 3 days later, the Battle King sect would send an envoy to receive the Black Cloud sect. This news wasn't concealed and was directly spread to the outside world. Many people knew about it. At the same time, the news of the Black Cloud sect's rejection was also spread. The Black Cloud sect was very powerful, and they had their own foundation and courage. Immediately, everyone's gazes shifted from the True Sword sect to the Black Cloud sect. The Black Cloud sect's attention skyrocketed. The Black Cloud sect was ranked in the top 3 of the quasi-second-rate forces in the Azure Water Dynasty. They were extremely powerful. If Chumu hadn't released those puppets, the True Sword sect and the Black Cloud sect would have been 2 completely different existences. The Black Cloud sect's strength was publicly acknowledged, while the Battle King sect's origins were mysterious. Even after the True Sword sect's defeat, they didn't immediately take revenge on the True Sword sect. They didn't stop their actions either. This meant that they were still very powerful. 26-star saints and over 100 saint experts. This Black Cloud sect is indeed very powerful. Chu Mu smiled faintly. However, the Battle King sect is definitely stronger than the Black Cloud sect. This time, I have a premonition that the Black Cloud sect is finished. 3 days passed very quickly. A 10-meter-long golden flying ship of the Battle King sect streaked across the sky at an extremely fast speed towards the Black Cloud sect. It soon arrived above the Black Cloud sect. The flying ship's door opened, and a figure flew out. It was a golden-robed man with long hair. The part of his face that wasn't covered by his long hair looked a little demonic. There was a hint of laziness in his eyes. With a wave of his hand, he put away the flying ship. His figure flashed, and he landed lightly but quickly. He ignored all obstructions and headed straight for the Black Cloud sect's main hall. "Who are you? How dare you barge into my Black Cloud sect's main hall?" An elder immediately scolded. "Let me introduce myself. I'm the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. I'm here to take over the Black Cloud sect." The demonic, golden-robed man smiled faintly. He had an indescribable sense of casualness as he spoke unhurriedly. His appearance made it seem like he didn't place anyone in his eyes. "I'm the envoy of the Battle King sect. I've been waiting for you for a long time." As soon as he finished speaking, silhouettes appeared in the main hall of the sect. The Black Cloud sect's sect leader and the 6-star saint elders were all gathered. Outside, the 5-star saint and 4-star saint elders formed an encirclement. Vaguely, it seemed to be some kind of battle formation, with the pressure of black clouds pressing down. "From the looks of it, you've rejected my offer." The 3rd emissary's expression did not change in the slightest as he lazily said, "What I hate the most is people like you who refuse to cooperate. You'll only submit if some of you die." Chapter 1582. There were a total of 18 envoys from the Battle King sect. Ever since the Battle King sect had appeared, only the envoys ranked below the top 10 would take action. They would go to the main halls of 3rd-rate and quasi-second-rate sects to accept their allegiance and put them under the jurisdiction of the Battle King sect. For example, the True Sword sect had only sent the 11th and 12th envoys. The top 10 envoys, especially the top 3 envoys, were extremely mysterious. No one in the outside world knew of their strength, methods, and abilities. Today, when the Battle King sect sent the Battle King Golden Invitation to the Black Cloud sect, many people were watching. When the Battle King sect sent the 3rd envoy to the Black Cloud sect, the spectators were even more interested. The 3rd envoy was one of the most mysterious envoys. Just what kind of strength did he have to dare to go to the powerful Black Cloud sect alone? Was he arrogant, or was he truly confident? Everything would be revealed very soon. The Black Cloud sect's strength was obvious to all. It was something that had been known for hundreds of years. Even the first-rate sects were certain of the Black Cloud sect's strength. Most people believed that the 3rd envoy would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog. He wouldn't be able to return alive. This was because the 3rd envoy wasn't a high-level saint, but a peak 6-star saint. Within the Black Cloud sect, there was more than one peak 6-star saint. It was even rumored that although the great elder of the Black Cloud sect was only at the peak 6-star saint level, he had personally killed 3 peak 6-star saints, and that was when they joined forces. Most people believed that no matter how strong the third envoy was, he wouldn't be able to fight against so many saints of the Black Cloud sect by himself. He would most likely fail this time, and might even be killed by the Black Cloud sect. The Battle King's sect would suffer in silence. There were even many people who were secretly planning that if the third emissary of the Battle King sect were to really die in the Black Cloud sect, they would follow suit and attack the Battle King sect. After all, no one liked an unstable existence that appeared out of nowhere and threatened their survival at all times. Everything depended on whether the third envoy would succeed or fail, and whether he would be killed if he failed. However, not long after the Battle King sect's third envoy entered the Black Cloud sect, the saints hiding around the Battle King sect saw a golden figure fly out of the Black Cloud sect. A golden flying ship appeared, and the golden figure entered it and quickly left the Black Cloud sect. Clearly, the third envoy of the Battle King sect had left the Black Cloud sect alive. He actually managed to leave alive. It seems like the Black Cloud sect doesn't want to have a falling out with the Battle King sect. With the Battle King Martial School's tyrannical style, the Black Cloud Martial School let the third emissary leave alive. Soon, the Battle King Martial School will definitely send a large number of saint-level warriors here. How stupid! However, very quickly, a shocking piece of news came from the Battle King sect. The Black Cloud sect had changed its name to the Black Cloud Hall, becoming one of the branches of the Battle King sect. The Black Cloud sect didn't deny it and silently responded. They even erected a large stone tablet outside the Black Cloud sect, with the words Black Cloud Hall written on it. Now, everyone understood that when the third envoy of the Battle King sect left, it wasn't because the Black Cloud sect didn't want to have a falling out with the Battle King sect, but because they had already subdued the Black Cloud sect. What kind of ability did a peak 6-star saint have to be able to subdue the powerful Black Cloud sect by himself? Could it be that the third envoy of the Battle King sect was a monster? One had to know that the difference between a peak 6-star saint and a 7-star saint was huge, far greater than the difference between a peak 3-star saint and a 4-star saint. If a genius who could fight a 4-star saint with the strength of a 3-star saint, when he reached the 6-star saint level, it would be very difficult for him to fight a 7-star saint. At most, he would be able to dominate the 6-star saint level. Of course, if it was a monstrous genius, it would be different. Monstrous geniuses were said to appear once in 1,000 years and were extremely rare. They could fight against cultivators who were 2 stars higher than them. A 6-star saint could definitely fight against an ordinary 7-star saint, but they couldn't fight against an 8-star saint. Of course, the monstrous geniuses in the legends had even greater strength. Could the third envoy of the Battle King sect be a monstrous genius? It was hard to imagine. If he was, then the Black Cloud sect would really be subdued. What happened to the third envoy of the Battle King sect after he entered the Black Cloud sect? Apart from the Battle King sect's saint-level cultivators, nobody knew. However, the Battle King sect didn't say anything, and the Black Cloud sect didn't say anything either. Not long after, a new discovery was made. The current leader of the Black Cloud Hall wasn't the former patriarch of the Black Cloud sect, nor was it the Great Elder or the Second Elder of the Black Cloud sect. It was the former Third Elder of the Black Cloud sect. Then, what about the former patriarch, Great Elder, and Second Elder of the Black Cloud sect? Were they dead? Indeed, it was very likely that they were dead. Moreover, it was very likely that they had been killed by the third envoy of the Battle King sect. Because of that, the unyielding Black Cloud sect had submitted. Very quickly, another piece of news spread. The third envoy of the Battle King sect was an unrivaled 6-star saint-level cultivator. If his guess was correct, then the third emissary of the Battle King sect had killed the sect master first elder, and second elder of the Black Cloud sect, all by himself under the watchful eyes of the saint-level experts of the Black Cloud sect. Moreover, he had left unscathed. In the Black Cloud sect, there were only a few peak-level 6-star saints. The Black Cloud sect's sect master, great elder, and second elder were 3 of them. Moreover, the great elder's strength was the strongest, followed by the Black Cloud sect's sect master and second elder. Because of their talent and the Black Cloud sect's foundation, the 3 of them were not ordinary peak-level 6-star saints. With such strength, and with so many 6-star and 5-star saints surrounding them, they had still been killed. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect was an unrivaled 6-star saint-level cultivator. Of course, there were always people who thought that they were very strong and wouldn't accept it. They would even challenge them. An unrivaled 6-star saint-level cultivator. When Chumu heard the news, he smiled indifferently. He didn't make any comments because the word unrivaled was very vague. Who could be truly unrivaled? Moreover, he didn't know anything about the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. If he didn't know anything about him, he couldn't make any comments. However, using the word unrivaled to describe him didn't seem to bring any benefits, other than attracting unnecessary trouble. Just as Chumu thought, trouble quickly came to the Battle King sect. Outside the Battle King sect, someone was shouting. In the distance, there were even people watching. Gu Zhenze is here, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. Come out and fight with me. This person was a burly man with a huge sword on his back. His eyes were cold as he shouted. His voice was like rolling thunder, reverberating in all directions. It's Gu Zhenze from the quasi-first-rate force, the Sun Shrouding Valley. It said that he once killed 7 6-star saints at the peak of the 6-star saint level. When he reached the peak of the 6-star saint level, he fought against 5 veteran 6-star saints at the peak of the 6-star saint level all by himself. In the end, he killed 3 of them and severely injured 2. He's definitely a powerful 6-star saint level cultivator. Moreover, he always thought that he was the strongest person under the 7-star saint level in the Kanglin dynasty. This time, it said that the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect is an unrivaled 6-star saint level cultivator. He's not convinced, so he came to challenge. The people in the distance discussed. Gu Zhenze is here, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. Come out and fight with me. Gu Zhenze is here, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. Come out and fight with me. Gu Zhenze is here, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. Come out and fight with me. Seeing that there was no movement from the Battle King sect, Gu Zhenze shouted 3 more times. His voice was like rolling thunder, spreading further and further. Then, a golden ray of light flew out from the Battle King sect. I hate trouble the most, but you just have to find trouble for me. As the golden ray of light flew out, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect appeared in front of Gu Zhenze. They were a few hundred meters apart. If that's the case, then fight with me. Defeat me, or... Gu Zhenze's eyes shone with a sharp light. The big sword on his back jumped up. He raised his right arm and grabbed the big sword. Then he slashed it down, pointing it at the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect. With a thunderous voice, he roared, "Be defeated by me!" At that moment, it was as if lightning had flashed across the sky, lighting up the sky and the earth. It also lit up Gu Zhenze's face. Everyone could see the determination on his face. Defeat me, or be defeated by me. Choose one. How domineering. When I fight, it's only life and death. The 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect said calmly. His voice was calm and lazy, but it was filled with murderous intent. When he fought, he would either live or die. Calmly, he was even more domineering. All right, then it's not a winner. It's only life and death. Gu Zhenze was not afraid at all. He was a strong cultivator who had killed his way out of a storm of blood. Death was a common occurrence for him. Then, you can die. The 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect said softly. He extended his index finger and pointed it at Gu Zhanze. Gu Zhanze's eyes lit up. A strange energy seemed to have flashed past. It was like an illusion. Hundreds of meters away, Gu Zhanze held his sword in his hand. His strength was increasing rapidly. Just as he was about to reach his peak, his body suddenly trembled. His eyes widened. The qi that was about to reach his peak started to fluctuate. Then his bulging eyes started to bleed. His nose, ears, and mouth also started to bleed. His body shook violently and he fell down. Life and death with one finger. The third envoy of the Battle King's sect didn't cover his one eye. He lazily looked into the distance. Everyone was shocked. Everyone retreated far away. Their hearts were filled with shock. They were afraid that the third envoy of the Battle King's sect would kill them all. Even a strong cultivator like Gu Zhanze had been killed, let alone them. Chapter 1583. Gu Zhanze came to challenge the Battle King's sect's third emissary and was killed with a single finger. The news was like a storm. In just half a day, it spread throughout the Kanglan dynasty, causing a huge commotion. Killed with a single finger. I saw it with my own eyes. Many people went silent. The third emissary of the Battle King's sect was only at the peak of the 6-star saint level. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have been able to kill a veteran 6-star saint with a single finger. Even if he had the strength of a 7-star saint, he shouldn't have been able to kill Gu Zhanze so easily. Indeed, the difference between a 6-star saint and a 7-star saint was huge. It was possible to kill a 6-star saint instantly, but it would consume some energy. According to the news, the third emissary had only casually pointed with a single finger. There wasn't any powerful energy fluctuation, but the powerful Gu Zhanze was bleeding from all 7 orifices. This kind of death was extremely strange. This confirmed that the third emissary of the Battle King's sect was invincible in the 6-star saint level. Easily insta-kill a powerful 6-star sacred rank peak expert with a single finger? Chu Mu muttered to himself after hearing the news, and his thoughts quickly turned. Sovereign, although the third emissary of the Battle King's sect is a 6-star saint, his strength is probably comparable to a 7-star saint, the second elder said. In fact, the third emissary of the Battle King's sect is already a 7-star saint, but he used a special method to control his aura to the peak of the 6-star saint level. Chu Mu didn't reply. The third elder spoke up. Sovereign, the Battle King's sect's first emissary, second emissary, and third emissary are all very mysterious. The ranking of the emissaries is very likely based on their strength. If the third emissary is so powerful, then the second emissary and the first emissary's strength. Chu Mu understood the meaning behind the third elder's words. If the third emissary was already so powerful, then what about the second and first emissaries? It was hard to imagine. The third emissary could kill a 6-star saint with a single finger. Normal 7-star saints wouldn't be able to do so. Chu Mu said. He already had a clear idea in his head. If the third emissary is a powerful 7-star saint rank, then the second emissary and first emissary strength will be even stronger. They might even be 7-star saint rank experts at the high stage or peak. Then the Battle King's sect master's strength may be 8-star saint rank or even higher. Listening to Chu Mu's analysis, the elders' hearts gradually sank. If what Chu Mu said was true, then with the current strength of the True Sword sect, it was still impossible to fight against the War King sect. However, this is only a guess. There is another possibility, which is that the Battle King sect's first and second emissaries are indeed 7-star saint rank experts. But the third emissary is a true peak 6-star saint rank expert, said Chu Mu. Could it be that the third envoy of the Battle King sect is a monster? Otherwise, how could he have killed a powerful 6-star martial saint so easily with a single finger? One of the elders exclaimed. I don't know if he's a monster or not, but... Chu Mu didn't continue. Instead, he changed the topic. Elders, don't worry. Even if the Battle King sect has a 9-star Saint Realm expert, the true sword sect isn't afraid. Everything in the sect will continue as usual. This wasn't the first time Chu Mu said this. Hearing it again, the elders were stunned. Patriarch, what kind of trump card does the true sword sect have that we don't fear a 9-star Saint Realm expert? The second elder couldn't help but ask. If a 9-star Saint Realm expert comes, you'll know. Chu Mu smiled and continued to monitor the situation of the Battle King sect. Gu Jinzhe was killed. He belonged to the quasi-first-rate faction, Shrouded Sun Valley. He was also a genius that was heavily nurtured. Shrouded Sun Valley won't let his death go. Yes, Patriarch. The elders were helpless. The Patriarch liked to be mysterious. Shrouded Sun Valley was a quasi-first-rate faction. There were 8-star saints in the sect and more than 5 7-star saints. Gu Jinzhe is dead, who will go to the Battle King sect to seek justice. Shrouded Sun Valley Master asked. Valley Master, I'll go. A 7-star mid-level Saint Realm expert stood up and leaped. He turned into a stream of light and flew out of Shrouded Sun Valley, heading towards the Battle King sect. A 7-star Saint Realm expert's flying speed was extremely fast, faster than an ordinary flying ship. Not long after the 7-star Saint Realm expert from Shrouded Sun Valley took action. Many factions knew about it because they had been paying attention. A 7-star Saint Realm expert heading towards the Battle King sect should be able to see the true situation of the Battle King sect. The 7-star Saint Realm expert from Shrouded Sun Valley finally arrived outside the Battle King sect. I'm Shrouded Sun Valley's 4th elder. A few days ago, the 3rd envoy of the Battle King sect killed my elder Gu Jinzhe. Today, I'm here to seek an explanation. The 7-star saint of the Shrouded Sun Valley didn't enter the Battle King sect rashly because he didn't know if there was a 7-star saint in the Battle King sect. He didn't know if there was a stronger saint, so he couldn't take the risk. Scram! A loud roar sounded like the roar of an ancient beast. It was so powerful that it shook the ears of the people who followed from afar. It was as if their heads were hit by a giant hammer. Their bodies swayed in the air and they almost fell. Everyone was inexplicably shocked. This was definitely the power of a high-level Saint Realm expert. Indeed, there was a high-level Saint Realm expert in the Battle King sect. The expression of the 7-star saint-level expert from Shrouded Sun Valley changed, but he was not affected much. Stop pretending to be mysterious. Come out. With a loud roar, the Shrouded Sun Valley's 4th elder raised his hand and bent his fingers into a claw. He clawed down viciously. Boundless energy of heaven and earth gathered to form a giant claw. It was like a flying dragon's claw. Its power was shocking. Scram! The second roar sounded like the roar of an ancient beast. Immediately, a golden light shot up into the sky and rushed towards the giant claw. It was a golden figure. His body was tall and strong like an iron tower. He clenched his fist, stretched it out, and punched out again. Clenching his fist, stretching it out, and punching out. It looked like a very simple action, but it was like pulling a bow and pulling the bowstring to its limit. It was such a simple punch, but the moment it was launched, the space in front of the fist seemed to be compressed in an instant, and it also seemed to be broken in an instant. The saint-level cultivators who were watching from afar only felt the space around them solidify, suppressing their bodies and making it difficult for them to move. The incomparably strong pressure continued to invade them, and they had no choice but to use their powers to resist. The ordinary punch was like an earth-shattering punch. It shattered the mountains, shattered the rivers, shattered the earth, and even the sky was about to shatter. That punch seemed to have struck everyone's hearts and souls, causing them to be incomparably shocked. With a bang, the 4th elder's claw was directly shattered. It disintegrated inch by inch and turned into ashes. The punch carried an endless power as it blasted towards the 4th elder of the Sun Valley. It was extremely fast, ferocious, and domineering. With a boom, the 4th elder's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly pushed his palms forward, and a huge palm print condensed, forming an astonishing defense. This was a spell technique that was passed down in the Sun Valley. It was called the sun covering palm and was said to be able to cover the sky and the sun when practiced to the extreme. The sun covering palm could be used for both offense and defense. It was extremely powerful. With a bang, the punch was blocked by the sun covering palm, but the golden figure raised his fist and threw out a second punch. This punch was even more astonishing. With a bang, the sun covering palm was directly blasted into pieces, unable to resist. Immediately, the golden figure threw out a third punch. When the third punch was thrown out in an instant, fine cracks seemed to appear in the void under the fist. The fist force was like a giant dragon that was invincible, causing heaven and earth to shatter. The fourth elder of the Sun Valley's expression changed drastically. His face was filled with horror, but he was unable to dodge because the void around him seemed to be imprisoned. Even with his mid-stage, 7-star saint-level strength, he could not move. He could only gather all the strength in his body and gather it in his palms, exhausting all his strength to use the sun-covering palm. An even larger and thicker giant palm appeared. In an instant, it collided with the fist that was like a giant dragon. With a bang, it was as if the sky and earth were collapsing. The void exploded and countless ripples spread out, destroying everything. The dragon-like fist blasted open the thick and huge sun-covering palm and blasted a hole in it. The remaining force bombarded the fourth elder of the Sun Valley. In an instant, the fourth elder of the Sun Valley was hit in the chest. The treasured robe on his body shattered in an instant. His powerful saint body was also torn apart in an instant, as if his body was filled with explosives and detonated. The fist force contained an incomparably terrifying power that rushed into every part of the fourth elder of the Sun Valley's body. Even his head was not spared, causing his head to explode in an instant. Even the primordial spirit in his head was directly impacted. The primordial spirit that was about to escape shook after being impacted and could not leave at all. It was constantly bombarded by the terrifying fist force. The power was very ingenious. Under each bombardment, the primordial spirit was constantly weakened. After losing the protection of the body, it was destroyed in a few hits and completely disappeared between heaven and earth. And the golden figure that was like an iron tower stood in the void and looked at the dissipating fourth elder of the Sun Valley. He snorted coldly with disdain. Just now, it was him who had blasted the fourth elder of the Sun Valley with 3 punches. Not even his bones were left, and even his primordial spirit was destroyed. I am the second envoy of the warlord sect. If there is anyone else who is blind, feel free to come find me. After the strong man said those harsh words, he turned and flew into the mountain gate of the warlord sect and disappeared. In the distance, all the saint-level experts who were watching the battle broke out in a cold sweat. A mid-level, 7-star Saint Realm expert. That wasn't a mid-level Saint Realm expert, nor was it a low-level Saint Realm expert. That was an expert who could take charge of a second-rate force. Yet he was defeated by someone with a single punch, and it was only 3 punches. Ferocious, incomparably ferocious. The second envoy of the warlord sect was really too ferocious. This was even more ferocious and shocking than the third envoy who had easily killed Gujinza with 1 finger. Chapter 1584. In just a few short months, the Azure Water Dynasty had undergone a drastic change. The number of major events that had happened was more than the past few decades. First, the Battle King sect had appeared out of nowhere. No one knew where they came from, but their methods were forceful. They had subdued many third-rate and quasi-second-rate forces. Those who refused to submit were annihilated. However, the second-rate, quasi-first-rate, and even super-first-rate forces did not do anything. Following this, the Battle King sect reached out to the True Sword sect. Everyone thought that the True Sword sect would either submit or be exterminated. but unexpectedly more than 100 saint-level experts from the Battle King sect were killed. The Battle King sect did not immediately retaliate. Shortly after, the Battle King sect sent the Battle King Golden Invitation to the Black Cloud sect. However, the powerful Black Cloud sect rejected it. The Battle King sect's third envoy entered the Black Cloud sect. Everyone thought that the Battle King sect would suffer again, but the Black Cloud sect was subdued. The quasi-first-rate force, Shrouded Sun Valley, sent a 6-star peak saint to challenge the Battle King sect's third envoy. In the end, he was easily killed with a single finger. Shrouded Sun Valley sent a 7-star mid-level saint to demand an explanation from the Battle King sect. In the end, he was killed by the Battle King sect's second envoy with 3 punches. What a terrifying Battle King sect! Even a 7-star mid-level saint couldn't withstand 3 punches. The Battle King sect is definitely a powerful second-rate force. They might even be a quasi-first-rate force. Too mysterious, they appeared out of nowhere and are extremely domineering. What was interesting was that the quasi-first-rate force, Shrouded Sun Valley, did not retaliate. It was as if they had swallowed their anger. As for the other major forces, they did not make any moves either. How interesting! Chumu smiled. He was even more certain that the Battle King sect's origin was extraordinary. There must be a huge secret behind them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so terrifying. As for the other major forces, they would definitely know about it. The stronger the force, the clearer they would know. What did a force expand for? Talents. Resources. It was mainly for these 2 reasons. Only with talents could they pass down their legacy. Only with resources could they provide a better cultivation environment for talents. Every sect was actually expanding outwards. It was just that it had already become a foregone conclusion, so their expansion wasn't obvious. But the Battle King sect's methods were extremely intense. They had completely compressed the hundreds, or even thousands of years of expansion of other sects into a few short months. In Battle King sect, there are at least 2 7-star sacred rank experts. There should also be an 8-star sacred rank expert. As for whether they have a 9-star sacred rank expert, I'm not sure. Chumu thought to himself. However, he was not afraid. Perhaps Battle King sect was very powerful, even more so than True Sword sect. However, Chumu still had some trump cards and methods. Unless he had no other choice, he wouldn't casually use these trump cards. Every time he used them, he would definitely kill a powerful enemy. If the Warlord sect really wanted to deal with the True Sword sect, they would have to reveal some of their trump cards and make the Warlord sect suffer even greater losses. Even if there was a Saint King behind the Warlord sect, Chumu still had some confidence in dealing with them, because Bai Ling was in the True Sword sect's spiritual seal. There were 5 experts in the True Sword sect's spiritual seal. They represented Chumu's 5 chances. The weakest among them was a 7-star saint, and so on. The 4th strongest was an 8-star saint, the 3rd was a 9-star saint, and the 2nd strongest was a 9-star saint. The 2nd strongest was beyond the 9-star saint, and should be an exceptional expert. Then, the strongest Bai Ling, who was above the exceptional experts, should be a great emperor or holy emperor. Chumu had already let the 5th and 3rd experts fight. After that, Chumu couldn't let them fight anymore. However, the 4th, 2nd, and 1st experts hadn't fought yet. 8-star martial saints, peerless experts, great emperors, holy emperors. Chumu was very confident. Then there was the level 6 puppet formation, heavenly puppet formation, true secret 4 symbols sword formation, and so on. Other than Chumu, Gulankong, and a few others, no one else knew about this. No matter how good the 7th envoy of the Battle King sect was, he wouldn't be able to find out. 10 days had passed since the 11th and 12th envoy of the Battle King sect were killed. In these 10 days, the Great Elder had entered seclusion in the profound Yang Sword Hall. The other martial saints cultivated and took care of the sect's affairs. The disciples cultivated even more diligently. Because of the encouragement they received from that day, all of them had set Chu Mu as their goal. They were very motivated. Chu Mu was the same as usual. He cultivated his sword origin, pondered over his saint body refinement method, cultivated sword techniques, cultivated sword styles, and comprehended sword heaven and earth. He also took some time to refine snowflakes. Occasionally, he would rest and research puppet Dao. In a short period of time, he created a 1-star saint rank puppet. After reaching the immemorial realm, it wasn't easy to raise one's cultivation base. It had been more than a year since he left the ancient sacred city and returned to the true sword sect. His cultivation base was still at the early first sky of the immemorial realm. His primordial spirit was also at the peak of the second level. It couldn't be helped. Without a primordial spirit cultivation method, it was very difficult to raise one's cultivation base. Chu Mu also felt that under normal circumstances, it would take at least 10 years for his primordial spirit to reach the third level. In the Battle King sect, the 7th emissary spent more than 10 days researching the true sword sect and collecting information. He even snuck into the true sword sect several times to investigate and eavesdrop. In the end, he believed that he had grasped everything about the true sword sect and understood its strength and foundation. In other words, the true sword sect has a total of 14 martial saints. The sect master is a 1-star martial saint, but he can kill a 4-star martial saint. I suspect that he has the strength to fight a 5-star martial saint. There are 3 puppet arrays in the true sword sect. One is comparable to a 5-star martial saint, one is comparable to a 6-star martial saint, and one is comparable to a 7-star martial saint. There is also a puppet cave. The puppets in the puppet cave are all below the martial saint level. The 7th envoy spoke frankly. This is the strength of the true sword sect. If there is anything hidden, then there is an additional 7-star martial saint. The 7th emissary was most adept at information gathering. The training he received was mostly related to information gathering. Therefore, his words were very convincing. He didn't know that the 3 puppets guarding the spirit pool had been temporarily recalled by Chu Mu. "Who will go against the true sword sect?" asked the Battle King sect's sect master. Most people didn't say anything. They were only 6-star martial saints. The true sword sect had a 7-star martial saint puppet array. It wasn't something they could deal with. The ones who were truly capable were the top 3 envoys. "I'll go." Just as the 2nd envoy was about to speak, the 3rd envoy spoke first. "I'll see for myself what's so special about the true sword sect's sect master. He can instantly kill a 4-star martial saint as a 1-star martial saint. I'll go." "The true sword sect has a 7-star martial saint puppet array," said the 2nd envoy. "Puppets will always be puppets. Besides my speed." The 3rd envoy was very enthusiastic this time. He really wanted to see what the true sword sect's sect master was capable of. As soon as he finished speaking, the 3rd envoy's figure slowly faded. He disappeared like smoke. His real body had already left the Battle King sect. Soon after, the people on the thrones also left. Only a dozen envoys remained. 3rd brother's wind mist movement technique is even more mysterious. I didn't even notice him leaving. The 7th envoy was astonished. 3rd brother is about to break through. The silent 1st envoy suddenly spoke. His voice was ordinary and calm. He was publicly recognized as the number 1 envoy. He was extremely powerful. He didn't speak much, but his words were very convincing. "That's great. As long as 3rd brother breaks through, he can instantly kill a 7-star martial saint." The 2nd envoy smiled. The envoys left one by one. The 2nd envoy and the 1st envoy left together. If 3rd brother hadn't said anything, I would have gone to the true sword sect too, said the 1st envoy after a moment of silence. The 2nd envoy was astonished. The true sword sect is known as a sword cultivation sect. All of their martial saints are sword saints. The true sword sect master is a 1-star sword saint, but he can instantly kill a 4-star martial saint. It's said that the sword domain he uses is no ordinary sword domain. I'm very interested, added the first envoy. The second envoy immediately understood. The first envoy's cultivation path was also the sword Tao. The first envoy was a powerful sword saint. Since Big Brother is interested, why don't we go to the true sword sect together? Suggested the second envoy. There's no need. If the true sword sect has a 7-star sword saint, then it's worth me going, said the first envoy. In other words, the true sword sect didn't even have the qualifications for him to go because they didn't have a 7-star sword saint. He didn't care about the puppet formation. Actually, even if we leave now, it'll be too late by the time we get there. Third brother is extremely powerful. He can easily take care of the true sword sect master. He won't even have the chance to release the puppet formation, said the second envoy. What they meant was that the true sword sect master, Chumu, was already a dead man. After the third envoy left the Battle King sect, he took out a 10-meter-long golden flying ship. He entered the flying ship and flew towards the true sword sect at a speed comparable to a 7-star martial saint. The third envoy was more lazy. He enjoyed himself as much as he could. He wouldn't waste his energy to travel. The flying ship was extremely fast. It flew across the sky with a golden streak of light. It didn't take long for it to attract the attention of many people. It couldn't be helped. The Battle King sect was now the focus of attention. Every move they made would attract attention. There were spies all around the Battle King sect. As such, the third envoy's flying ship was quickly discovered by others. They immediately spread the news to let more people know. It's in the direction of the true sword sect. Is the Battle King sect finally going to make a move on the true sword sect? It seems like the Battle King sect has figured out the true sword sect's strength. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to make a move. The third envoy is an invincible 6-star martial saint. Will the true sword sect be able to stand firm this time? After the third envoy's flying ship, the other martial saints also followed. Chapter 1585. The golden flying ship arrived outside the gates of the true sword sect. The golden flying ship was kept, and the third emissary appeared. He landed outside the gates and didn't barge in. Instead, he asked the disciples guarding the gates to report his arrival. Sect leader, please don't. The third emissary of the Battle King sect is too strange. The second elder's expression changed. He was afraid that Chu Mu would agree. The third emissary of the Battle King sect requested to visit the sect leader of the true sword sect. Since it was a visit, it would be a face-to-face meeting. The news of the third emissary killing Gu Zhenzhe, a 6-star saint, with one finger was still circulating. Chu Mu was only a 1-star saint. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't fight against a 6-star saint. Even a 6-star saint wasn't a match for the third emissary. How could Chu Mu fight against him? If Chu Mu was killed, wouldn't the true sword sect be destroyed or become a vassal of the Battle King sect? No matter what the outcome was, they couldn't accept it. Everyone, don't worry. Let him in. All of you go outside. Chu Mu said. Sect leader, please don't. The elders still wanted to persuade him. I have a trump card. Chu Mu said, his tone calm and confident. Chu Mu was extremely resolute. When the elders saw that they couldn't persuade him, they expressed that they wanted to stay. However, they ultimately had no choice but to leave. Chu Mu had a guess that was pretty close to the truth. Therefore, if the elders stayed, they wouldn't be of any use. Instead, they might get killed. The current true sword sect had too few sacred rank experts, and they were all sword saints. They couldn't afford to lose them. Although the elders left the main hall, they didn't go far. They were scattered all around. The third emissary of the Battle King sect floated over. His figure was like a gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, the third emissary entered the main hall. All the elders were nervous, and their palms were sweating. Within the great hall of the sect, only Chumu sat on the sect master's seat. Although you're only a 1-star saint, your courage is extraordinary. Even a 6-star saint can't compare to you. After the Battle King's sect's third emissary entered the great hall, his gaze fell on Chumu and he lazily spoke. Just by standing there, he gave people the feeling that he was going to lie down. It was as if he would never sit if he could lie down, and he would never stand if he could sit. Do you have a name? Chumu said calmly. He didn't feel any fear just because the other party had killed a 6-star saint with a single finger. It was as if the other party's strength was about the same as his. The third one is my name. The third emissary said, You are indeed a rare genius. Join the Battle King sect. The True Sword sect will have the highest status and the best treatment. It had to be said that this was indeed a very big promise. Based on the current situation, the War King's Gate would not stop and would continue to expand rapidly. In the future, there would be more and more factions that would submit to the War King's Gate. Naturally, there would be a difference between the factions that submitted to the War King's Gate and the resources they enjoyed, the importance they received, and so on. A single promise could allow the True Sword sect to receive treatment and importance that other factions couldn't. It would be completely different. Its status would be even higher, just below one person and above all. However, Chumu wasn't moved at all. His True Sword sect didn't need to submit to anyone or any faction. Back then, the True God Sword sect was a large sword cultivation sect that stood at the peak of the deep blue world. The True Sword sect wanted to recreate the glory of the True God Sword sect. No matter how great the War King's Gate's background was, they wouldn't be able to stop the True Sword sect. I'm very curious. Just where did the War King's Gate come from? Chumu didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. As long as you submit to the sect, you'll find out very quickly. The War King's Gate's origins will definitely exceed your imagination, said the third envoy. He didn't seem as lazy as before. Instead, he seemed serious. Then there's no need for that. Let's cut to the chase and attack. Let me see the attacks of a soul transformation cultivator, said Chumu. That casual sentence caused the third envoy's one eye that wasn't covered by his hair to tremble. It instantly narrowed and shot out a terrifying light. It took him a breath to recover. You actually know. How did you know? The third envoy's voice was no longer as lazy as before. This was the anger of someone whose secret had been seen through. Casually killing a peak 6-star saint with a single finger without causing any ripples of energy is something that even a 7-star saint can't do. As for you, you're not a monster, nor are you a 7-star saint. With your cultivation at the peak of the 6-star saint realm, you can easily kill a peak 6-star saint. Only a soul transformation cultivator can do that. Chumu said calmly. With each sentence, the third envoy's expression changed. However, Chumu acted as if he didn't notice anything and continued. You're at the peak of the 6-star saint realm. As a cultivator of the Tao of primordial spirit, your primordial spirit should be at the peak of the 3rd level at most. As for your primordial spirit secret technique, it should be at the peak of the 3rd level at most. The third envoy's expression changed again and again. In the end, he calmed down and even started clapping. Not bad. Your analysis is correct. Then, do you think my primordial spirit secret technique is at the 3rd or 4th level? Asked the third envoy with a smile. There was a difference of 1 level between the 3rd and 4th level. Under normal circumstances, a 3rd level primordial spirit secret technique would be able to threaten a 3rd level primordial spirit secret technique. If one didn't have a corresponding defensive secret technique, their primordial spirit secret technique would be damaged or even destroyed. However, a 4th level primordial spirit secret technique would be able to threaten a 4th level primordial spirit secret technique. A 3rd level primordial spirit secret technique and a 4th level primordial spirit secret technique. One was a black iron primordial spirit secret technique, while the other was a bronze primordial spirit secret technique. Strictly speaking, a 3rd level primordial spirit secret technique could threaten a 6-star saint, while a 4th level primordial spirit secret technique could threaten a 7-star saint realm. It's the same whether it's at the 3rd or 4th level. Chumu said he wasn't a god. How could he know whether the 3rd envoy's primordial spirit secret technique was at the 3rd or 4th level? After all, there was too little information. Then Chumu moved his mind, and 6 puppets appeared in the hall. They were spread out in 6 directions and vaguely surrounded the 3rd envoy. However, they hadn't formed a 5th level puppet formation yet. Now, let's see if your primordial spirit secret technique can destroy my primordial spirit, or if my puppets can form a puppet formation and kill you, Chumu said with a smile. If the 3rd envoy had used his primordial spirit secret technique to attack him from the beginning, Chumu wouldn't have had the chance to release the 6 5-star saint puppets. Of course, because he was confident that he could block the 3rd envoy's primordial spirit secret technique. He only needed to block it once. As for the current situation, it could be said that the 3rd envoy had caused it himself. If he hadn't been so confident in himself and left time for Chumu, it could also be said that Chumu had caused it. His words had shaken the 3rd envoy's mind and caused him to miss the best opportunity to attack. Now, the 3rd envoy felt like he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off. However, he still had enough confidence in himself. He could use his primordial spirit secret technique to kill Chumu. Then he could use the wind and smoke movement technique to escape the puppet formation and leave calmly. The primordial spirit of a cultivator of the primordial spirit secret technique was powerful and good at calculation and simulation. In a few breaths' time, he had already come up with a complete strategy in his mind. "I'll fulfill your last wish before you die," the 3rd envoy said. His light sentence contained an infinite amount of murderous intent. With that, the 3rd envoy stretched out a finger and pointed at Chumu. It was just like when he pointed at Guzhenza. It was light, and there wasn't the slightest bit of smoke or fire. There were also no strong ripples of power. There was only a weak and strange ripple of power. In an instant, just as Chumu felt something, his body trembled slightly. The 3rd envoy's primordial spirit secret technique had already entered his spiritual world and was closing in on his primordial spirit. In the outside world, primordial spirit secret technique was formless and colorless. It couldn't be seen, touched, or felt. Furthermore, it was extremely fast. Once it entered the spiritual world, it would appear. In Chumu's spiritual world, a completely black needle was piercing towards his primordial spirit at an extremely fast speed. The completely black needle exuded a frighteningly cold aura. It almost froze Chumu's spiritual world. Under this black needle, all rules and laws were powerless against it. In an instant, the black needle pierced through the red ring and shot towards the orange ring. The orange ring was also powerless against it. It was directly pierced through and shot towards the yellow ring. The yellow ring's defensive power was stronger than the orange ring's. After piercing through the red and orange rings, the black needle's speed decreased by a level. The power it carried also decreased by a level. In an instant, the black needle and the yellow ring clashed. The black needle desperately wanted to pierce through the yellow ring and attack Chumu's primordial spirit. As for the yellow ring, it resisted the black needle. This was because the yellow ring was the last and strongest line of defense. Once the yellow ring was pierced, Chumu's primordial spirit would be attacked. A primordial spirit without protection was very fragile. A peak level 3 primordial spirit secret technique that's close to level 4. Chumu could clearly feel the power of the black needle. His primordial spirit was at the peak of level 2. As his soul was stronger, it was not inferior to a level 3 primordial spirit. With the 30% boost from the black gold mask, it was considered strong among level 3 primordial spirits. The red, orange, and yellow rings of the rainbow rings were also strengthened by 30%. The yellow ring could defend against level 3 primordial spirit secret techniques. After being strengthened by 30%, it could barely defend against a peak level 3 primordial spirit secret technique. As for the black needle, it was weakened by 1 level by the red and orange rings. It was about the same as the yellow ring. The two of them faced off. Chu Mu's body only swayed for a moment before he regained his composure. Only the light in his eyes was flickering. The 6 5-star saint level puppets moved at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, they formed a level 5 puppet formation. The third emissary's original plan was to use his primordial spirit to kill Chu Mu instantly before using the wind smoke body technique to escape before the puppet formation. However, after using his primordial spirit secret technique, he could feel that his primordial spirit secret technique was resisted. This situation surprised him. This surprise caused him to miss the best opportunity and fall into the trap of the level 5 puppet formation. Chapter 1586. Outside the True Sword sect, many people were waiting. Time passed slowly, but they didn't see the figure of the third emissary. Outside the main hall, the elders were extremely nervous. Sword origin surged in their bodies. They were ready to attack at any time, even if it meant risking their lives. "Come in." Suddenly, a familiar and indifferent voice sounded in their ears. Everyone trembled and excitedly rushed into the main hall of the sect. Their sect leader was still sitting on the sect leader seat. He was playing with an interspatial ring in his hand. Below him was a corpse covered in a golden robe. "He's dead." The elders were all dumbfounded. The third emissary of the Battle King sect, who was said to be invincible under the 7-star saint realm, had turned into a corpse on the ground. The sect leader, whom they thought they couldn't defeat, was sitting on the sect leader's seat, unharmed. What was going on? What exactly had happened in the process? Countless questions surged in their minds. "I told you I have a trump card," Chu Mu said, neither quickly nor slowly. He didn't feel arrogant or complacent from killing the Battle King sect's third envoy. After a long time, the elders came back to their senses. "Sect leader, this is too scary." The second elder smiled bitterly. He felt that his heart couldn't handle this kind of challenge. "Sect leader, what happened just now?" The third elder couldn't help but ask. "He attacked me, but he couldn't kill me. I'm alive, but he couldn't stop the level 5 puppet array. So he died," Chu Mu said simply. The third emissary of the Battle King sect was so strong because he was a cultivator of the primordial spirit Tao. Chu Mu added, "A cultivator of the primordial spirit Tao." The elders were shocked. There were 3 paths of cultivation: Qi cultivation, body cultivation, and spirit cultivation. When one reached the saint realm, they would cultivate origin energy, body cultivation, and primordial spirit cultivation. They would focus on whichever path they were good at. Most cultivators walked the origin energy path. A few of them were good at the body cultivation and walked the body cultivation path. A few of them were good at the soul cultivation and walked the primordial spirit cultivation path. No matter what Tao one walked, one would need a cultivation technique. For example, a cultivator with a powerful soul would not be able to become a cultivator of the Tao of the primordial spirit if they did not have a suitable primordial spirit cultivation method. Chu Mu was an example. The third emissary of the Battle King sect had an extraordinary soul talent, and he also had a primordial spirit cultivation method, which was why he was able to become a cultivator of the primordial spirit. Sect leader, if he's a cultivator of the Tao of the primordial spirit, then you? The third elder seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes widened. "I'm not a primordial spirit cultivator yet, but I have some trump cards." Chu Mu said, "This third emissary is not only a cultivator of the primordial spirit Tao, he is also very outstanding in other aspects." This was because, after being surrounded by the level 5 puppet formation, he actually relied on his movement technique and sword technique to continuously dodge and counterattack. He lasted for close to 15 minutes before he was killed. If it were any other peak 6-star martial saints, even if it was an elite like Gu Jinza, they would not be able to hold on for long. At most, they would die within a few breaths. In other words, even if the third emissary did not use a secret technique to attack the primordial spirit, he could still kill Gu Jinza. Cultivators of the Tao of the primordial spirit were born with a powerful soul. Their memory and comprehension abilities were extraordinary, and they could comprehend cultivation methods faster than others. It was also easier for them to grasp the essence of cultivation methods and understand them more thoroughly. This was an advantage. Regardless of whether it was sword technique or movement technique, the third emissary of the Battle King sect had cultivated them to a level that others could not reach. He possessed extraordinary strength. Furthermore, cultivators of the Tao of the primordial spirit had powerful primordial spirits, and they could use their primordial spirits more thoroughly. They could use their spiritual power more thoroughly, and it was easier for them to find and grasp the opponent's flaws. Among the cultivators of the 3 paths, cultivators of the Tao of the primordial spirit were the least, but they were also the most powerful and the most feared. They were powerful in almost every aspect. As long as they were willing, they could learn more than others, and their comprehension was deeper than others. This made others feel despair. Time continued to pass, and the third emissary still did not leave the True Sword sect. The True Sword sect was also peaceful, and there were no signs of a battle. This was very confusing. The third emissary of the Battle King sect had died to the rank 5 puppet formation. His space ring became Chu Mu's spoils of war. Chu Mu opened the space ring with some anticipation, hoping to find the third emissary's cultivation method and secret method for attacking the primordial spirit. After some searching, Chu Mu found the third emissary's cultivation method and secret method for attacking the primordial spirit as he wished. However, he was greatly disappointed after reading it. The cultivation method for cultivating the primordial spirit was called the 3 transformations. It was a rank 3 cultivation method for cultivating the primordial spirit. The first transformation was a rank 1, and the third transformation was rank 3. Cultivating the 3 transformations would allow one's primordial spirit to reach the peak of rank 3. Other than being able to cultivate the primordial spirit to the peak of rank 3, the 3 transformations also possessed a special characteristic, which was that the power of the primordial spirit recovered faster. It could be said that every single cultivation method for cultivating the primordial spirit possessed at least one other ability apart from the limit of cultivation. The 3 transformations of the primordial spirit could accelerate the recovery of the power of the primordial spirit. The first transformation was 10%, and the third transformation was 30%. It could be said that every single cultivation method for cultivating the primordial spirit of the same level would recover the power of the primordial spirit at the same speed. In that case, the 3 transformations of the primordial spirit would increase the recovery rate by 10 to 30%. The reason why Chu Mu was disappointed was because the cultivation method for cultivating the primordial spirit was only rank 3. However, his primordial spirit was currently at the peak of rank 2, so it could still be cultivated. It was better than nothing. As for the secret method for attacking the primordial spirit, it was called the soul-piercing needle. It was a rank 3 secret method for attacking the primordial spirit. Both of them were rank 3, and once cultivated to the peak, he would be at the peak of rank 3. Under normal circumstances, the primordial spirit of a peak 6-star martial saint would only be at the peak of rank 3. Without a defensive secret technique for the primordial spirit, it would be impossible to resist a peak rank 3 primordial spirit attack secret technique. Chu Mu was looking forward to having a higher primordial spirit cultivation method, and primordial spirit attack, secret technique. At the very least, it should be rank 4. Rank 3 was too low. However, he was also glad that it wasn't rank 4. Otherwise, he would have been facing a rank 4 primordial spirit attack. It's better than nothing. Chu Mu thought to himself. He could cultivate the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts and the soul-piercing needle now. He could even use these 2 primordial spirit secret techniques as the secret techniques of the true sword sect for the elders to cultivate. In the future, he could also let disciples with soul talents cultivate them. However, before that, Chu Mu had to cultivate them first. After instructing Gu Luankong and the other 2 to equip themselves with heavenly puppets and guard the true sword sect, Chu Mu entered the mystic Yang sword world. In the Boundary Steel Hall, he prepared to cultivate the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts. He also planned to cultivate the soul-piercing needle. However, there was a sequence between the 2. The strength of the primordial spirit was the foundation. Everything else came after that. Gu Luankong and the other 2 were equipped with heavenly puppets. Each of them had the strength of a peak 7-star martial saint. When the 3 of them worked together, they could fight against an 8-star martial saint. As for the 3 rank 6 puppets, Chu Mu temporarily handed them over to Gu Luankong. When necessary, he would release them to form a rank 6 puppet formation. This formation would be able to fight against an 8-star martial saint and protect the true sword sect against strong enemies. There were few soul talents, but there were still differences between them. For example, Chu Mu, among soul talents, was definitely at the top of the class. In the Boundary Steel Hall, he took out the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts and started to comprehend it. His strong comprehension allowed him to comprehend it without any difficulties. In just half a day, he had comprehended the mysteries of the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts and started to cultivate it. The Boundary Steel Hall was filled with dense and pure yang qi. The yang qi could refine yuan li, qi, and primordial spirit. It was very magical. Chu Mu started to cultivate the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts. First was the first transformation. The first transformation was to revolve the power of the primordial spirit at a unique speed with a unique rhythm to achieve the goal of cultivation. The first transformation was easy. The second transformation wasn't difficult either because Chu Mu's primordial spirit was at the peak of rank 2. However, the third transformation was very difficult. He could only repeat the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts over and over again to refine the power of the primordial spirit and absorb the yang qi from the outside world to refine his primordial spirit. The previous refinement was passive refinement. It was naturally nourished by the yang qi. But now, the refinement was through the absorption of the primordial spirit cultivation method. The efficiency had increased by dozens of times. If it was before, Chu Mu still needed 10 years to break through from the peak of rank 2 to rank 3. But with the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts, the time needed to break through would be shortened by 100 or even 1,000 times. The mystic thought's second transformation was repeated over and over again, constantly absorbing the yang qi to refine the primordial spirit. If the 3rd emissary of the warlord sect was still alive and knew about this, he would be extremely envious. Chu Mu could feel his primordial spirit condensing at a slow speed. Chu Mu was immersed in the cultivation of the 3 transformations of the mystic thoughts, while the outside world was bustling with noise and excitement. Half a day had passed, but the 3rd emissary of the warlord sect still hadn't come out of the true sword sect. This made the saint-level experts of the various forces who were hiding in the surroundings extremely surprised. When the 3rd emissary entered the Black Cloud sect, he left in less than an hour without any injuries. Why did he take so long to enter the true sword sect? A few saint-level experts who couldn't hold themselves back descended and arrived at the entrance of the true sword sect. "Junior, what did the 3rd emissary of the warlord sect say to you before?" The saint-level experts' attitudes were still considered polite. To pay a visit to the sect master. Facing a saint-level expert, the Nirvana realm disciples weren't afraid and simply replied, "Pay a visit." The saint-level experts looked at each other. It seemed that they were being too polite. After all, they had directly barged into the Black Cloud sect. The saint-level experts immediately communicated with each other through voice transmission. In the end, they discussed and decided to pay a visit to the sect master of the true sword sect. Of course, the visit was fake. They wanted to see what was going on. Thus, they requested a visit from the disciples guarding the entrance, hoping that they would pass on their message. The disciples guarding the entrance naturally didn't refuse and passed on their request. Chapter 1587. Not long after, the disciple who went to report came back. "Seniors, I'm truly sorry. The sect master is currently receiving an important guest, so it's not convenient for him to see you." The disciple cupped his hands and said respectfully. There was nothing wrong with his expression. Receiving an important guest. Being rejected, the saints didn't get angry. The current true sword sect's strength was unfathomable. They didn't dare to make an enemy out of the true sword sect. Nodding, they left, but the truth didn't go far. "How is it?" The other saints came over and asked. "The sect master of the true sword sect is receiving an important guest." The saints answered honestly. Receiving an important guest. Everyone fell silent. It had been half a day since the third envoy of the Battle King sect had entered the true sword sect, but he still hadn't left. After all, they were sure that the Battle King sect had come to take revenge on the true sword sect. But why hadn't there been any commotion yet? The words "receiving an important guest" made everyone's imagination run wild. This important guest should be the third envoy of the Battle King sect. Calling him an important guest. Could it be that the true sword sect is planning to submit to the Battle King sect? Thus, countless guesses appeared. But in the end, they all thought that the true sword sect was planning to submit to the Battle King sect. If that wasn't the case, why would they call him an important guest? They definitely didn't know that this was just a fabrication by the second elder. Because Chu Mu was in seclusion for the time being, he was in charge of the sect's affairs. In order to avoid the Battle King sect's next round of revenge and not cause too much commotion, he came up with this excuse on the spur of the moment. They would never have thought that this was a trap set up by the second elder on the spur of the moment. No matter how stubborn they are, they still have to submit in the end. This was what a disciple who left the true sword sect said. It also represented the thoughts of many other disciples who left the true sword sect. After all, they had left the true sword sect when it was in danger. If the true sword sect had been wiped out by the Battle King sect, they wouldn't have felt any pressure. They would even feel that they were wise to avoid disaster. However, not only had the true sword sect not been destroyed, they had instead annihilated more than 100 saint-level experts from the War King School, displaying astonishing strength. The disciples who had left all felt extremely uncomfortable. It turned out that the true sword sect had such strength, but they deliberately did not let them know. They hid it, causing them to make the wrong judgment and be mocked by others. After being ridiculed, those who were originally calm became angry from embarrassment. They even became dissatisfied with the true sword sect, which gradually turned into hatred. The ridicule of others and the torment in their hearts had not been easy for them. Now that they heard that the true sword sect was going to submit to the warlord sect, they all heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if they had made the right choice. Otherwise, they would have to submit to the warlord sect right now. In the end, the true sword sect was unable to withstand the pressure from the Battle King sect. Some people shook their heads and sighed. The Battle King sect is unstoppable. From the looks of it, the strength of the true sword sect is only SOSO. If they don't submit, they will only be exterminated. Between life and death, I believe many people know what to choose. Should I say that the true sword sect knows when to advance and retreat, or are they afraid of death? There were all kinds of discussions. Third brother is indeed powerful. He immediately subdued the true sword sect. In the Battle King sect, the envoys were all impressed. Why hasn't the third brother returned yet? The second envoy was puzzled. He is interested in the true sword sect's leader. He must be trying to figure it out. The first envoy said, "Sometimes the third brother's temperament is like that of a child." For the time being, they did not suspect anything. They also thought that the true sword sect was really going to submit to the Battle King sect. This was the situation that the elders of the true sword sect wanted to see the most. They wanted to drag it out as long as possible, although there would be a day when the truth would be revealed sooner or later. The longer they dragged it out, the better. It would be best if they could drag it out until the leader came out of seclusion. Otherwise, without the leader, the elders would not feel confident. It was not because they were useless, but because they were under a lot of pressure. Their personal life and death did not mean anything, but the survival of the true sword sect was the most important thing. If they thought too much, the pressure would increase. That was the difference between being an elder and not being a leader. The leader of a sect had to have the ability to control the entire sect. He would be the backbone of the sect and would be able to calm the hearts of the people. However, the elders were only responsible for one aspect of the sect. They had to think about different things. Very quickly a day passed. The third envoy of the Battle King sect still did not appear. One day was actually nothing. No one suspected anything. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. On the 5th day, the third envoy of the Battle King sect still did not appear. This attracted the attention of the Battle King sect. Why hasn't the third brother returned yet? The second envoy was confused. Logically speaking, no matter how curious the third envoy was, a few days should be enough. Each of them had a life plate left behind by the fusion of their spirit and blood essence. Unfortunately, they were not in the Battle King sect. They were in another place that they could not reach. Only the leader knew about it. However, the leader had not appeared for a few days already. It seemed that he had left the Battle King sect temporarily and had not returned. They could only continue to wait until the leader returned. Inside the true sword sect, the disciples did not go out. However, there were many discussions because the news from the outside world had spread. Impossible. How could the leader submit to the Battle King sect? I don't believe it either. There were all kinds of discussions. Almost all the disciples believed that the leader would not submit to the Battle King sect. However, there must be a reason for the news to spread. However, because the leader had not appeared for a long time, the disciples were worried. Fortunately, the elders had spread the news that the leader was in emergency seclusion. Emergency seclusion meant that he was about to make a breakthrough in a certain aspect. In the Boundary Monument Palace, Chu Mu had been cultivating the third transformation technique. Cultivating the primordial spirit would consume the primordial spirit's power. Therefore, it was impossible to cultivate continuously. However, Chu Mu was in the Boundary Monument Palace. Under the rich and pure yang qi, he could continuously absorb and refine it. With the black gold mask's 30% boost, his primordial spirit's recovery speed was extremely fast. This allowed him to cultivate even more, cultivating over and over again. And on the 5th day, Chu Mu felt that his primordial spirit had reached the peak. It had reached the true limit of the peak of the 2nd level. Next, it was time to break through. After 5 days of cultivation, Chu Mu continued to absorb and accumulate the yang qi. After a certain amount, he began to break through. Break, break, break. In the spiritual world, 3 sounds rang out. Each sound was louder than the previous, and each sound was stronger than the previous. It was like a thunderclap. The primordial spirit's power continued to rotate, carrying the rich and pure yang qi. It was like the roar of the sea and the impact of the collapse of the mountains. In an instant, there was a pop. It was as if something had been broken. The third transformation technique entered the third transformation technique. In an instant, Chu Mu felt his spiritual world tremble. There seemed to be a layer of black light above his primordial spirit. Immediately, his primordial spirit seemed to become very light. It almost flew up, but in an instant it became heavy and fell down. It was more stable and solid. The luster around his primordial spirit became a long and heavy pure black. The primordial spirit's light of the black iron primordial spirit was black. It went from the initial faint black to a pure and heavy black. It had experienced 3 levels of change. The light of the primordial spirit now represented that Chu Mu's primordial spirit had broken through from the peak of the 2nd level to the 3rd level. The reason why he could break through so quickly was that Chu Mu's primordial spirit was very strong. The peak of the 2nd level was comparable to a 3rd level primordial spirit. The 2nd was the endless pure yang qi in the boundary steel hull. The 3rd was the mystic thought's 3rd transformation technique. All 3 were indispensable. Of course, Chu Mu's primordial spirit had to be at the peak of the 2nd level. Once the primordial spirit broke through, the feeling was immediately different. His 6 senses rose sharply. His comprehension and other aspects were also enhanced. I've finally broken through the 3rd level of the primordial spirit. It's a pity that I can't improve quickly from now on, Chu Mu said. He was now at the early stage of the 3rd level of the primordial spirit. There were still 3 levels after that. The middle stage, the late stage, and the peak stage. Every small improvement was not easy. If he did not have a primordial spirit cultivation technique, it would take at least decades or centuries. With a powerful primordial spirit cultivation technique, he could shorten the time by several times or even more. The early stage of the 3rd level primordial spirit, with its own uniqueness and the 30% boost from the black gold mask, was comparable to a late stage of the 3rd level primordial spirit. Chu Mu took out the primordial spirit attack secret technique, the soul-piercing needle, and began to study it. The cultivation method of the 3rd level primordial spirit attack secret technique, the soul-piercing needle, was to cultivate the power of the primordial spirit into the shape of a needle. The process was not complicated, but it required a lot of patience to condense the power of the primordial spirit into the shape of a needle. Once the needle was formed, the next step would be to continuously refine and nurture it until it reached the limit. During the attack, the power of the soul-piercing needle would be stimulated and the power of the primordial spirit would be consumed. When released, the needle would pierce into the opponent's spiritual world and go straight for the primordial spirit. The power of the primordial spirit was different from the power of the soul. The power of the soul could be said to be a derivative of the power of the primordial spirit. The power of the soul could be released at will, but the power of the primordial spirit was contained within the primordial spirit. Only a primordial spirit attack secret technique could release it, and only a primordial spirit defense secret technique could defend against it. Chu Mu had a 3rd level primordial spirit, so it was not difficult for him to cultivate the soul-piercing needle. In less than half a day, a black needle was successfully condensed and suspended above the head of the primordial spirit. The current soul-piercing needle was only at the level of a 1st level primordial spirit. With the boost from Chu Mu's 3rd level primordial spirit, it could threaten a 2nd level primordial spirit. The next step was to refine the soul-piercing needle and raise its grade until it reached the peak of the 3rd level. This would require some time. Chu Mu came out of seclusion. Chapter 1588. Sect Leader, you're finally out of seclusion. The 2nd elder heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Chu Mu appear. He had been under a lot of pressure for the past 5 days. It was the same for the other elders. How's the situation? Chu Mu smiled and asked. The 2nd elder immediately told him everything that had happened in the past few days. Chu Mu listened quietly. Sect leader, now that you're out of seclusion, you can clarify things to the outside world. The second elder said. What he said was just a temporary measure. A misunderstanding is a misunderstanding. There's no need to care about it. Chu Mu said nonchalantly. This time, I'll teach you a secret primordial spirit cultivation technique that can allow you to cultivate up to the peak of level 3 primordial spirit. In addition, there's also a secret primordial spirit attack technique that you can cultivate. Lastly, there's a secret primordial spirit defense technique that I obtained from the ancient sacred city. Hearing Chu Mu's words, the elders were shocked. The secret primordial spirit cultivation technique, the secret primordial spirit attack technique, and the secret primordial spirit defense technique were each more precious than the other. They knew that the secret primordial spirit cultivation technique and the secret primordial spirit attack technique must have belonged to the third envoy of the warlord sect. Now that he was dead, it became Chu Mu's possession. If Chu Mu could defend against the third envoy's primordial spirit attack, then the secret primordial spirit defense technique must be powerful. Chu Mu was not stingy. He directly passed down the 3 secret primordial spirit cultivation techniques to every martial sage. As for those cultivators below the martial sage level, they could not cultivate them because they did not have primordial spirits. My suggestion is to first cultivate the 3rd rotation of the mystic will. Your primordial spirits have never been cultivated before and have always been refined and improved naturally. Therefore, they contain a lot of potential. The primordial spirit cultivation method will fully develop your accumulated potential and allow your primordial spirits to have an obvious improvement in a short period of time. Chu Mu said, after your primordial spirits have stabilized, you can cultivate the secret primordial spirit attack or defense techniques. Thank you, Sect Master. The elders were extremely grateful. The 4 enslaved by Chu Mu were the same. How precious were these Yuan spirit secret techniques. Furthermore, there were 3 of them at once, and they were all complete in terms of offense and defense. The primordial spirit defense secret technique that Chu Mu had passed down was naturally the rainbow ring. However, he had only taught them the first 3 rings. Even if they knew about the remaining 4 rings, they would not be able to cultivate them. Next, Chu Mu compiled the 3 Yuan spirit secret techniques and stored them in the scripture pavilion of the True Sword Sect in the Profound Yang Sword Hall. They would be passed down as secret techniques of the True Sword Sect. In the future, loyal disciples of the True Sword Sect would be able to cultivate them after breaking through to the eternal ancient realm. The last 4 rings of the Rainbow Ring were also compiled and stored away. There was a scripture pavilion in the True Sword Sect's mountain gate. It was mainly used to store cultivation techniques that were not that important. As for the important ones, such as the Sword Truth compiled by Chu Mu and the Sword Techniques and Yuan Spirit secret techniques brought from the myriad sword steel, they were stored in the Profound Yang Sword Hall. It was safer. As for the Great Elder, Chu Mu went to take a look before leaving the Profound Yang Sword World. The Great Elder was in a critical period. He had already stabilized and was beginning to break through to the 4th level of the primordial spirit. He did not have a secret primordial spirit cultivation technique, so he could only rely on the most primitive methods to temper his primordial spirit. He might be able to break through in a few months, or it might take a few years. Gu Wangkong and the other 2 naturally obtained the cultivation method of the mystic thought 3 transformations and the soul piercer. The mystic thought 3 transformations was especially suitable for them. Because they were only at the 1st level of the primordial spirit, it would take a long time for them to reach the peak of the 3rd level. Chu Mu came out of seclusion to preside over the sect's affairs. The 3 of them once again entered the Profound Yang Sword Hall to cultivate in seclusion. At the moment, there was no need for them to do anything. Everything was peaceful. Those who needed to cultivate cultivated, and those who needed to do things did things. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed since the third envoy of the warlord sect entered the True Sword sect. On the 11th day, some people realized that the third envoy of the warlord sect had not appeared since that day. Puzzling, it was very puzzling. Why didn't the third envoy of the warlord sect appear again? Could it be that the third envoy of the warlord sect had died in the True Sword sect? Was it just a rumor that the True Sword sect had submitted to the warlord sect? Immediately, some people began to investigate. Unfortunately, it was difficult to find any useful information. They did not know that the body of the third envoy of the warlord sect had already become food for the ancient spirit beasts in the profound Yang sword world. Why hasn't the third brother returned yet? In the warlord sect, the second envoy frowned. No, I have to go and take a look. He had the best relationship with the third envoy. He almost treated the third envoy as his own brother. At this moment, the sect master of the warlord sect returned. All the envoys who were still in the warlord sect were summoned. The third envoy's life jade has shattered. The person sitting on the throne spoke. His voice was very calm, and one could not tell whether he was happy or sad. 10 days ago. As soon as the words were spoken, the expressions of all the envoys changed, especially the second envoy's face. It was incomparably ugly. 10 days ago, the third envoy's life jade had shattered. That meant that the third envoy had died 10 days ago. 10 days ago, the third emissary entered the True Sword sect and didn't leave. It was at that time that he died in the True Sword sect. The news about the True Sword sect submitting to the Battle King sect was just a rumor, a conspiracy of the True Sword sect. Sect Master, please allow me to fight the True Sword sect. I want to annihilate the entire True Sword sect. The second envoy gritted his teeth and said, the anger in his heart was like a volcano erupting. The third emissary had actually died in the True Sword sect 10 days ago. As for him, he had only just found out about it. He had been deceived for 10 whole days. 10 whole days! The hatred in his heart was like an endless river. The True Sword sect is very strange, said the sect master of the warlord sect. No matter how many schemes they have, in front of absolute power, they're useless, said the second envoy. He was determined to annihilate the True Sword sect to avenge the third envoy. Sect master, I have neglected my duty. I did not truly understand the True Sword sect's methods and caused the death of the third envoy. I will also go to the True Sword sect, said the seventh envoy. Sect master, please allow us to annihilate the True Sword sect. The other envoys all begged. They knew very well that the True Sword sect and the warlord sect were already mortal enemies. They had been trained since they were young and had stood out from thousands of others. They were competitors, but they also had a brotherly relationship. Since the warlord sect and the True Sword sect were mortal enemies, they would fight sooner or later. Instead of splitting up and going to the True Sword sect one by one, they might as well go together and annihilate the True Sword sect in one fell swoop. They would let people know how powerful the warlord sect was and the consequences of opposing them. The first envoy didn't say anything. He just stood there, but his eyes were flickering with sword intent. You are allowed to go to the True Sword sect and annihilate them, said the sect master of the warlord sect. However, the saints of the other sects will be the vanguard. Yes. The envoys all bowed and turned around. They quickly left the warlord sect and rose into the air. At the same time, they sent messages to the saints of the other sects who had submitted to them. After that, the first envoy waved his hand and 100-meter long golden flying ship appeared. The 15 envoys entered the flying ship one by one. The flying ship started moving and its speed increased rapidly. It flew in the direction of the True Sword sect. The 15 envoys of the warlord sect didn't try to hide their movements. The saints hiding around the warlord sect immediately knew about them. The Battle King sect had displayed a total of 1 patriarch and 18 envoys. Every single one of the envoys had the strength of a late-stage, 6-star saint. The top 3 envoys were even more mysterious. The second envoy had displayed the terrifying strength of a mid-level 7-star saint with 3 punches. Now, the 11th and 12th envoy had died outside the True Sword sect. The third envoy hadn't shown up after entering the True Sword sect. Many people were suspicious. Now, the Warlord sect had sent out the remaining 15 envoys. What were they going to do? After analyzing the situation, many people came to a shocking conclusion. The third envoy of the Warlord sect hadn't left the True Sword sect because he was already dead. He had died not long after entering the True Sword sect. Of course, dead people couldn't leave. If that was true, then the Warlord sect must have been completely infuriated. That was why they had sent out the remaining 15 envoys to the True Sword sect. They wanted to annihilate the True Sword sect. If that was true, then the True Sword sect had other secrets. The news spread like a storm. It was even faster than the flying ships of the Warlord sect. Immediately, the experts of many sects and factions moved. They hurried to the True Sword sect as quickly as possible. Some people who were closer to the True Sword sect arrived first. They didn't enter the True Sword sect. Instead, they hid outside and waited. This time, not only were there saints from third-rate, quasi, and second-rate forces, but there were also many saints from quasi, first-rate, and first-rate forces. Sect Master, something bad has happened. Elder Yunfeng hurriedly found Chumu. He was in charge of collecting information, so he naturally knew about the situation. What is it? Chumu wasn't in a hurry. The remaining 15 envoys of the Warlord sect have all moved out. They're rushing over with ill intentions, said Elder Yunfeng. They're finally here. Chumu wasn't surprised at all. He knew that this day would come sooner or later. It was just a matter of how long it would take. Seeing that Chumu wasn't in a hurry at all and was even looking forward to it, Yunfeng was speechless. At the same time, he gradually calmed down and felt ashamed. They were both 1-star saints, but the sect master was calm and composed while he was panicking. They couldn't compare. Gather all the elders. Prepare to receive the 15 envoys of the Warlord sect. Chumu said with a smile, as if he had everything under control. This time, just like the previous 2 times, we'll make them unable to return. We'll also let them understand that our True Sword sect is not to be casually provoked. Yes, Sect Master. Yunfeng took a deep breath. Yunfeng sucked in a deep breath and said in a low voice. Hearing Chumu's words, for some reason, his heartbeat became even stronger and faster. His blood flowed even faster. His entire body was filled with energy that surged like a great river, endless and unending. Chapter 1589. In the sky above True Sword sect, Chumu stood alone in the air. Apart from the Great Elder, the other elders couldn't interfere in this battle. The Great Elder was in seclusion. Even the strongest second elder couldn't fight against the weakest envoy, let alone the others. The weakest of Battle King Sect's 18 envoys had the strength of a 6-star, late-stage saint rank. Even Chumu himself could not contend against them. It had to be said that this was True Sword Sect's current predicament, a very awkward situation. Although the elders didn't come out to fight, they had their own tasks. They had to organize the disciples and protect them. After all, these disciples were truly loyal to the True Sword sect. They were worthy of being nurtured. In the future, the True Sword sect would have to rely on them to become stronger. Inside the True Sword sect, the elders and disciples all looked outside. Their gazes were focused on Chumu's back. His lonely back had an unparalleled aura. Time passed slowly. The atmosphere became more and more tense. In the distance, black figures began to appear. They were gathering from all directions at a rapid speed. So many flying ships. Has the entire Battle King sect moved out? The expressions of the saint-level beings lurking around the True Sword sect all changed drastically. The black figures gathered together, forming a black mass. It was like a line between the sky and the water. They were rapidly approaching. 1 ship, 2 ships, 3 ships. Chu Mu's pupils shrank. He was surprised. He thought that there were only 15 envoys from the Battle King sect. Now, it seemed that there were more than that. Each flying ship was 100 meters long, led by a golden flying ship. There were 50 to 60 flying ships of different colors and shapes around the golden flying ship, as if they were escorting the golden flying ship in a mighty formation. Wherever the flying ships passed, the yuan qi of heaven and earth would become chaotic. Scratches were left in the void. The True Sword sect is finished. The Battle King sect is furious this time. Sect Master, the elders and disciples of the True Sword sect clenched their fists. 600-meter long flying ships had all arrived and stopped a few thousand meters away from Chu Mu. Each flying ship was emitting a chilling aura fluctuation, bringing an incomparably powerful pressure that was suffocating. The doors of the flying ships opened one after another, and figures flew out one after another. There were a total of 15 figures flying out of the golden flying ship. The other flying ships had at least 5 to more than a dozen figures flying out. Each of them was a Saint Realm expert. They were all low-level Saint Realm experts and mid-level Saint Realm experts. There were about 500 to 600 Saint-level experts on the flying ships. Every Saint-level expert exuded a powerful and chaotic aura, stirring up the qi of heaven and earth and shaking the void. Thinking about it, the scene of 500 to 600 low-level and mid-level Saint-level experts standing together was very shocking. Their aura caused a huge vortex to appear in the sky, spinning chaotically. It gave people the feeling that the sky was about to collapse. The True Sword sect only had 1 person, while the Battle King sect had 500 to 600 people. There was a huge disparity in numbers. The True Sword sect only had 1 person, who was an early-stage 1-star saint. On the other hand, the Battle King sect had 500 to 600 people. The weakest one was a 1-star saint, while the Battle King sect had many 6-star saints. There was even the second envoy of the Battle King sect and the mysterious first envoy. How could the True Sword sect fight against the Battle King sect with such a huge difference? Everyone thought that the True Sword sect was finished this time. However, the sect master of the True Sword sect is truly bold. A 1-star martial saint dares to face 500 to 600 martial saints by himself. If it were me, I would definitely feel weak in the knees. Someone praised, "This is a foolish method. He overestimates himself and is seeking his own death," someone else said with disdain. It didn't matter if others were praising or disdaining him. It had nothing to do with Chu Mu. He was only doing what he should do. Moreover, he was confident in this. The worst thing that could happen was that he would use up 1 chance. However, Chu Mu's gaze swept over them. His sharp eyes flickered with a faintly discernible glint as he swept his gaze over the 560 sacred rank experts. Perhaps I don't need to use up 1 chance, Chu Mu thought to himself. In his eyes, out of the 506 martial saints, the strongest was a 7-star martial saint. One of them was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man, while the other was a tall and strong man who looked like an iron tower. As for the rest, the strongest was only a 6-star martial saint. That tower-like giant should be the second emissary of the Battle King sect, who had defeated the 7-star saint-level expert of the Sun Valley with 3 punches. Looking at his body, which contained incomparably powerful strength, he should be a cultivator of the Saint Body Tao. As for the seemingly normal middle-aged man, he made Chu Mu feel a strong sense of danger. He was even stronger than the Iron Tower-like giant man, much stronger. Sword Saint. As a sword saint with profound attainments in Sword Tao, even if his cultivation was weak, Chu Mu could still feel a sliver of sword aura from this normal middle-aged man. It was a very pure sword aura, and he determined that he was a sword saint. The ones that Chumu cared about were the first and second emissaries of the Battle King sect. He didn't care about the others. Although he didn't care about them, there were too many of them. It would be troublesome to deal with them. He had to spend more time. It seems like I might have to use the heavenly puppets this time. Chumu thought to himself. Luckily, he had already informed Gulwankong and the other two. They were armed with heavenly puppets and hidden within the True Sword sect. They were ready to attack at any time. The heavenly puppets were at the peak of the 7-star Saint realm. Their speed was shocking. They arrived in the blink of an eye. You are the sect leader of the True Sword sect. The first emissary looked at Chumu and said, "You are very brave." "Thank you." Chumu smiled and said, "No matter how brave you are, you will die if you dare to kill the people of the Battle King sect." The second emissary's voice was like thunder. It rumbled in everyone's ears. "We don't know who will die yet." Chumu wasn't afraid at all. "However, I have to thank you. The True Sword sect is in a period of development. We need a lot of resources. Since you are sending them over, the True Sword sect will accept them." Chumu's words stunned everyone. Even the first and second emissaries of the Battle King sect were stunned. To put it simply, this group of people from the Battle King sect, these 500 to 600 saint-level experts, were here to deliver themselves to the True Sword sect. They would all die, and after they died, their treasures would become the True Sword sect's spoils of war, contributing resources to the True Sword sect's development. Such words were completely wild ravings. Yet they were said by Chumu in such a calm tone. It made it impossible for others to describe what kind of feeling it was. They only felt that their hearts were extremely complicated. Good. Just based on his boldness, whether he is arrogant or confident, I will remember him. A high-level Saint Realm expert who was hiding in the surroundings couldn't help but say, "Sect Master." Within the True Sword sect, the elders and disciples were indescribably excited. In an instant, Chumu's figure was like a brand that fell into their hearts and souls, never to be erased. The Battle King sect's sacred rank experts all let out angry expressions. Chumu's words meant that he was treating them as prey as food. They were all sacred rank experts, after all. How could they be looked down upon like this? Very good. I hope you can still be so unyielding in the future. The second emissary of the Battle King sect sneered. "Attack! Capture everyone from the True Sword sect alive. I will crush them one by one in front of their sect master." The second emissary of the War King sect reached out and clenched his fist, creating a series of explosions. A cruel and bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face, sending chills down people's spines. Chumu waved his hand and released his puppets. The puppets have appeared. 27 puppets can form a total of 3 puppet arrays. No, it's not 27 puppets. It's 30 puppets, 3 more than last time. Not only 3 more, but each of the 3 extra puppets has the strength of a 6-star saint. Immediately, the eyes of the 30 puppets lit up. They moved quickly and formed 4 puppet formations in the blink of an eye. The level 3 puppet array, level 4 puppet array, level 5 puppet array, and level 6 puppet array respectively had the strength of a 5-star saint, a 6-star saint, a 7-star saint, and an 8-star saint. Next, Chumu released his sword domain, enveloping most of the saints who were charging at him. His primordial spirit had reached the early grade 3 stage. Because of the strength of his soul and the 30% boost from the black gold mask, his primordial spirit was comparable to a late grade 3 primordial spirit. It was much stronger than when he was at the peak of grade 2. As a result, his sword domain was strengthened as well. It originally covered an area of 3,000 meters, but now it had increased to 4,000 meters. An area of 1,000 meters could cover more saints. After all, they weren't inanimate objects. They wouldn't foolishly stay in one place without moving. However, the saints who were covered by Chu Mu's sword domain, those who weren't above the 5-star saint level, all felt their bodies tremble. They were restrained by an invisible force. It was difficult for them to move. Their strength and speed were obviously affected. This was especially true for the 4-star saint level and low-level saint level experts. They felt it the most obvious. Their strength decreased by 30 to 40%. As for the 5-star saint level experts, they had a greater resistance. Their strength decreased by about 10 to 20%. As for the 6-star saint level experts, they immediately circulated their own strength and forcibly broke free from the binding force. They were no longer affected by it. At the same time, white snowflakes surrounded Chu Mu. There were more than 500 snowflakes in total. They floated in the air. Chapter 1590. The snowy slaughter sword domain has appeared again. It seems to be even stronger than before. Exclamations rang out. The 500 snowflakes had been given a sharp edge by Chu Mu and were imbued with astonishing power. His primordial spirit had broken through from the peak of the 2nd level to the 3rd level. This allowed Chu Mu's mastery of the snowy slaughter sword domain to increase even further. The number of snowflakes had also increased from 300 to 500. The power contained within each snowflake was even stronger. Of course, it would consume even more energy of the soul. The energy of the soul relied on the energy of the soul. So the energy of the soul wouldn't be consumed when the energy of the soul was consumed. Thus, the energy of the soul could rely on the energy of the soul to recover. However, primordial spirit energy could only be controlled by primordial spirit energy through primordial spirit secret techniques. If one's spiritual energy was depleted, it would affect one's mental state. Although it would not be as bad as primordial spirit energy, it would still cause one to feel dizzy, unable to concentrate, and one's strength would plummet. If one's primordial spirit energy was depleted, one would immediately fall into a coma. From releasing the puppets to releasing the sword domain and the 500 snowflakes, it took less than a breath's time. Under Chu Mu's control, the 500 snowflakes had begun their attack. Chu Mu did not bother with 6-star martial saints because it was not enough to kill them. It would be difficult to even injure them. However, he could attack 5-star martial saints and those below. The first emissary of the warlord sect immediately reacted. However, he did not move. Instead, he stood where he was and watched with anticipation in his eyes. None of the martial saints covered by the sword domain were truly from the warlord sect. Whether they lived or died, he did not care. The snow-white snowflakes were extremely beautiful. The edges of the snowflakes flickered like swords, making the snowflakes look even more dazzling. Such a mesmerizing scene brought about fatal killing intent. After the snow-white snowflakes, there were patches of crimson red. The crimson red was formed by strands of blood. It was dazzling and shocking to the eye. Among the 500 to 600 saint-level experts, there were more low-level saint-level experts, about 300 of them, and about 200 mid-level saint-level experts. Among them, there were more than 46-star saint-level experts, and the rest were 5-star and 4-star saint-level experts. Under the attack of the snow slaughter sword domain, all the low-level martial saints died. All the 4-star martial saints died, and most of the 5-star martial saints died. Only those at the pinnacle of the 5-star martial saints survived. Not a single 6-star martial saint was unharmed. No matter what, the fact that the snow slaughter sword field was able to kill nearly 500 martial saints was enough to shock everyone. A sense of dread emerged from the depths of their hearts. If Chu Mu wasn't a 1-star martial saint, but a 4-star martial saint, wouldn't everyone be killed? Fear and horror inexplicably struck their hearts. The disciples of the True Sword sect began to cheer. What a terrifying person! 1 against 100. If such a person grows up, he will definitely be a terrifying monster in the future. If the War King sect can't kill him this time, it will be even more difficult in the future. It's unwise to provoke such a person. The attack of the Snow Slaughter Sword Field had intimidated the other martial saints, but the puppets wouldn't be intimidated. They had already begun to attack the remaining martial saints. The 6th level puppet array was extremely powerful. With the strength of an 8-star martial saint, 3 strikes were able to kill 3 6-star martial saints in an instant. The 5th level puppet array was also very powerful. With the strength of a 7-star martial saint, it was able to kill the 6-star martial saints in an instant. As for the 4th level puppet array, with the strength of a 6-star martial saint, it attacked the surviving 5-star martial saints. The 3rd level puppet array was the weakest. With the strength of a 5-star martial saint, it didn't move. It stood in the distance on guard. By the time the other martial saints reacted, the puppets had already begun their massacre. They had already killed more than 25-star and 6-star martial saints, and the number of martial saints had decreased sharply. After they reacted, the martial saints immediately retreated. At the same time, the 2nd and 1st emissaries of the War King's sect moved. The 2nd emissary's tower-like body raised his fists and punched out. In an instant, a terrifying rumbling sound resounded in the air. His fists were like dragons as they struck the 4th level puppet array. With his terrifying strength that could kill a 7-star martial saint in 3 punches, the 4th level puppet array couldn't resist at all. It would probably shatter under 1 punch. At the same time, the 1st emissary also made his move. The 1st emissary stretched out his right hand. With a rumbling sound, it was as if 10,000 lightning bolts had struck down from the sky. A dazzling lightning bolt surged out from his palm. Immediately, a sword surrounded by countless lightning bolts appeared in his hand. The 1st emissary didn't move at all. His aura was as calm as an ordinary person's. The moment he moved, it was as if a bolt of lightning had appeared in the world. With a light flick of the Thunder Spirit sword in his hand, an arc-shaped sword light that was formed by countless tiny lightning bolts in a mysterious way shot out. It looked like a simple sword attack, but it attracted Chumu's attention. There was a feeling that made his hair stand on end. That was a very powerful sword attack. It was aimed at the 5th level puppet array. Chumu was sure that the 5th level puppet array wouldn't be able to resist it. In the blink of an eye, Chumu had already given the order. These puppets didn't have any intelligence. They only knew how to fight based on their instincts. They didn't understand danger, so they didn't even try to dodge. Under Chumu's command, the 6th level puppet array attacked the Thunder Sword Light. The 5th level puppet array attacked the 2 dragon-like fist energies. As for the 4th level puppet array, it quickly moved and dodged, attacking the other 5-star martial saints. The 2 dragon-like fist energies were forcefully blocked by the 5th level puppet array. The terrifying Thunder Sword Light was also blocked by the 6th level puppet array. An intense battle ensued. After the 4th rank puppet array killed a few 5-star saint ranks, it immediately surrounded the 5-6-star saint ranks charging towards Chumu and started attacking them from within. At this time, other than the 15 emissaries of the Battle King sect, there weren't many martial saints left. There were a dozen 6-star martial saints and a dozen 5-star martial saints left. The 1st emissary was held back by the 6th level puppet array and couldn't escape. The 2nd emissary was held back by the 5th level puppet array and couldn't escape either. They were caught in an intense battle. Of the dozen 6-star martial saints, another 5 were trapped by the 4th level puppet array. Although the 4th level puppet array couldn't kill them immediately, it could still trap them. If they couldn't escape, they would be tortured to death by the puppet array sooner or later. The 13 emissaries of the Battle King sect were all very powerful. Capture everyone from the true sword sect. They didn't attack Chumu. Instead, they obeyed the 2nd emissary's order and planned to capture all the elders and disciples of the true sword sect alive. They would kill them one by one in front of Chumu to vent their hatred. The 13 emissaries weren't stopped at all. The golden light rapidly descended into the true sword sect. The elders and disciples were all highly focused. They knew that the critical moment had arrived. Perhaps they would all die here, but even if they died, they weren't afraid. It was worth it to have such a sect master. Other than the 13 emissaries of the Battle King sect, the remaining dozen 5-star martial saints were trapped in Chu Mu's sword domain. Their speed was greatly reduced. 2 of the 10 6-star martial saints came from the left and right, ready to capture Chu Mu. As for the other 8, they quickly rushed into the true sword sect, planning to capture the elders and disciples of the true sword sect. Their idea was good, but the result was terrible. The elders and disciples gathered in the depths of the true sword sect. The 6-star martial saints that had descended quickly disappeared without a trace. Facing the 2 middle stage 6-star sacred rank experts and a dozen 5-star sacred rank experts, Chu Mu didn't show any panic. Under his sword domain, his strength and speed increased by at least 30%. His originally powerful saint physique became even more powerful. Following that, Chu Mu activated the demon fighter armor on his arms. His strength increased by another 30%, and his attack speed increased by 20%. In this way, the strength of his arms increased by 60%, and his attack speed increased by 50%. Following that, a light flashed on Chu Mu's body. A set of exquisite armor appeared on Chu Mu's body, covering him from top to bottom. This set of armor flickered with a silver luster. It was a divine armor that had successfully evolved after absorbing the silver divine stone. The silver divine armor. Chu Mu's silver divine armor had evolved from the original black iron divine armor. It was a balanced divine armor that increased his strength, speed, and defense by several times. His strength had also increased. Under the silver divine armor, Chu Mu reached out with both hands and grabbed at the void. 2 swords appeared at the same time, the eternal spirit sword in his right hand and the sky-piercing saint sword in his left. With 2 swords in hand, his strength doubled. In an instant, Chu Mu's divine armor appeared. With 2 swords in hand, the 2 6-star mid-level Saint Realm experts attacked from the left and right. This sudden change alarmed many people once again. All eyes were focused on Chu Mu. From the beginning until now, Chu Mu had only released his sword domain and puppets. He hadn't directly participated in the battle. Some people analyzed Chu Mu. The sword domain was a representative power of the sword Tao. It was a very powerful power. The strength of the sword domain wasn't directly related to one's cultivation. It was closely related to one's control of the sword and the sword Tao. A powerful sword domain also represented a sword saint's shocking attainments in the sword Tao. In other words, Chu Mu's attainments in the sword Tao were incomparably shocking. He was a genius sword saint, a monstrous genius sword saint. However, his actual strength wasn't that strong because he was merely a low-level 1-star Saint Realm sword saint. No matter how strong he was, there was a limit to his strength. It was impossible for him to fight against a 5-star Saint Realm expert, not to mention a Meteor Star Saint Realm expert. However, judging from Chu Mu's actions, it seemed like he wanted to fight against the 2 6-star mid-level Saint Realm experts. Was he crazy? No, Chu Mu wasn't crazy. Activating the Sword God's Descent secret technique, Huang Xiaolong's secret technique circulated rapidly within his body. Shocking sharpness merged with his own momentum, and it slashed out in an invisible manner towards the 2 6-star mid-level Saint Realm experts. Chapter 1591. At this moment, almost everyone's attention was on Chu Mu. The first envoy of the Battle King sect also glanced at Huang Xiaolong while fighting the 6th puppet array. However, the 6th puppet array had the strength of an 8-star martial saint. It was a huge threat to him, so he couldn't afford to be distracted. The second envoy was also very powerful, but he couldn't break free from the 5th puppet array. The two six-star martial saints who were charging towards Chu Mu were startled. They felt an incomparably sharp aura, as if an invisible divine sword was slashing towards them. The sharpness of the aura made their hearts tremble uncontrollably. Chu Mu crossed his swords. The moment they collided, countless sparks flew in all directions, as resplendent as fireworks. It was extremely beautiful, and the sound of the collision spread out in all directions. The clear and melodious sound lingered in everyone's ears. In an instant, Huang Xiaolong's figure shot forward. His two swords clashed with the two six-star martial saints as he attacked. Everyone was shocked. Chu Mu, a mere one-star martial saint, actually dared to attack two six-star martial saints. Was he overestimating himself, or was he really confident in winning? But no matter what, the fact that he dared to draw his sword against two six-star mid-level martial saints was proof of his extraordinary courage. "You're courting death." The two six-star martial saints sneered coldly and attacked. Powerful rays of light pierced through Chu Mu's figure, and Chu Mu's figure dissipated. Before dispersing, Huang Xiaolong's figure brushed past the two six-star martial saints. In an instant, they realized that something was wrong. They quickly turned around and saw a figure rushing towards the group of five-star martial saints. Huang Xiaolong's speed was so fast that they couldn't catch up with him. Capture him alive. More than a dozen five-star martial saints formed a circle and quickly surrounded Chu Mu. They wanted to capture Chu Mu alive. However, what awaited them was Chu Mu's two swords. A ring of sword light bloomed in front of his eyes. It was so bright and dazzling that it was hard to look at it directly. Immediately, thousands of clouds and mist appeared. As they rose and fell, they covered the surroundings in all directions, hindering one's vision and the transmission of spiritual energy. It made one feel that one's movements had become somewhat sluggish. Before one could react, an extremely condensed sword light silently pierced through the clouds and mist, tearing apart all obstacles. Chu Mu's breakthrough from the peak of the second level to the third level allowed him to improve in all aspects. He had a deeper understanding of the sword style that he had created, and he had a better grasp of it. The power in his sword was also more condensed. The cloud-piercing sword style, a sword piercing through the clouds, piercing through everything. Hard and flexible, there was nothing it could not break. Under this sword, there was nothing that could be done to stop it. It stunned the eyes of countless people and made their minds tremble. Wherever the sword passed, it directly pierced through the glabella of the three five-star martial saints. Even the primordial spirits in their spiritual worlds were affected. Their consciousness was destroyed, and their primordial spirits dispersed. He raised the sword in his left hand, and the aura of Tao condensed and did not dissipate. The sword light was like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. It hung in the sky and pierced through the firmament. The Tao cutting sword style cut through everything. The void was hard and flexible, and there was nothing it could not break. The incomparably bright sword light once again stunned everyone and took away 4 lives. 7 of the more than 10 five-star martial saints were killed in an instant. Chu Mu's original strength was enough to kill a 4-star martial saint and fight against a 5-star martial saint. Now that he was in his sword realm, his strength and speed had increased by 30%. On the other hand, the 5-star martial saints were suppressed by the sword realm, and their strength had decreased by 10% to 20%. Moreover, Chu Mu had used the demon fighter vambrace, which increased his arm strength by 30% and his attack speed by 20%. He used the sword with both hands and had a strong martial saint body. Without a doubt, his close combat strength had increased by a lot. He had also activated the Sword God's Descent secret technique, which increased his sharpness by 10 times. He was also equipped with the Silver Divine Armor. The Silver Divine Armor increased one strength based on the original foundation. Generally speaking, Chu Mu's sword god's descent secret technique had also been increased by 2 times, from the original 10 times increase to 20 times increase. To be more specific, Chu Mu's strength, speed, defense, and other aspects had all increased by several times. First, it was the sword realm, then the demon fighter vambrace, and finally the divine armor. With such terrifying strength and the more powerful cloud-piercing sword style and Dao-cutting sword style, it was not surprising that he could kill 3 or 4 people in an instant. Spread out. The remaining 9 5-star martial saints' faces changed drastically. They hurriedly burst out with their full speed and rushed in all directions, not daring to fight Chu Mu in close combat. The 2 6-star martial saints were shocked and rushed over. They felt that Chu Mu did not dare to fight with them and chose to fight the 5-star martial saints instead. Most likely, he did not have the confidence to fight against them. The 6-star martial saints who had entered the true sword sect could not see their figures. They could only vaguely feel that there was a burst of energy. It was just a burst of energy, but it quickly calmed down. There was no sound. It should be them who had attacked the elders and disciples of the true sword sect. Including the sect master, there were only 14 martial saints in the true sword sect. Now that Chu Mu, the sect master, was fighting outside, there were only 13 martial saints left. 3 of them were 1-star martial saints. As for the strongest great elder, he was probably in seclusion to consolidate his strength after his burst of energy. Their deduction was correct. Those martial saints could not fight against the 6-star martial saints who had entered. As for the disciples of the true sword sect, the strongest was only at the high level of the Nirvana realm. They were not monsters like Chu Mu. Even a monster like Chu Mu would not be able to fight against mid-level martial saints as a high-level Nirvana realm expert. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Therefore, people felt that they were fighting against the true sword sect. Because of the difference in strength, there was no big commotion. There were only small fluctuations. What a pity. This time, even if Chu Mu doesn't die, the true sword sect will be destroyed. Without the Battle King sect, with Chu Mu's ability, the true sword sect could really develop rapidly. Even so, if Chu Mu doesn't die, the people of the Battle King sect will not be at ease. Not to mention the Battle King sect, even the people behind the Battle King sect will not dare to underestimate them. Once these words were spoken, everyone fell silent. A Nirvana realm martial artist killing a martial saint. A 1-star martial saint killing a 5-star martial saint. What kind of monster was this? If he was given enough time to grow and become a 9-star martial saint, he would probably be able to fight against and even kill some of the peerless experts. If one provoked such a person and didn't kill him before he grew, there would be no end of trouble in the future. Chu Mu is indeed a monster. However, I feel that the reason why he is so strong is not because of his own strength. It is very likely related to the set of armor he is wearing. That's right. It is definitely that set of armor that gave him such strength. At this point, everyone's eyes were filled with fervor. A set of armor that gave a 1-star martial saint the power to kill a 5-star martial saint. If they were to obtain that set of armor, what kind of power would they obtain? 7-star martial saint? 8-star martial saint? Powerful 9-star martial saint? In an instant, everyone's breathing became hurried and their thoughts started to move. They were hesitating on whether they should take action to capture Chu Mu and take away the armor on his body. After hesitating for a long time, they still couldn't make up their minds. After all, the people of the Battle King sect were still present. The first and second emissaries of the Battle King sect were both 7-star martial saints. The second emissary was an advanced 7-star martial saint. However, his talent was outstanding, and he was also a cultivator of the Saint Body Dao. Ordinary 7-star martial saints were no match for him, let alone advanced 7-star martial saints. As for intermediate 7-star martial saints, just think of the 4th elder's fate. Fortunately, The puppets that formed the level 5 puppet array had the strength of a 4-star martial saint. Moreover, their bodies were tough and their defense was shocking. Every attack of the second emissary was divided into 1/6, weakening the attack by 1/6. When the puppets combined their strength, they had reached the 7-star martial saint level. With the puppets' tough bodies, they were able to withstand it. From the looks of it, it was very difficult to kill the second emissary of the Battle King sect with a level 5 puppet array. It was almost impossible. On the other hand, the first emissary was at the peak 7-star martial saint level. He was a sword saint and his attack power was shocking. It surpassed the 7-star martial saint level and even surpassed the 8-star martial saint level. He was at the intermediate 8-star martial saint level. Fortunately, the grade 6 puppet array had the strength of an 8-star saint. Moreover, because the body of a 6-star saint puppet was much stronger, even a 7-star saint would find it hard to injure it. Under the condition of forming a grade 6 puppet array and splitting its strength by 1/3, it was a piece of cake for it to deal with a mid-level 8-star saint. Under such circumstances, the first emissary was under even more pressure than the second emissary. The second emissary continued to use his strength. He punched out again and again, but every time he blocked, he was unable to do anything. This made him extremely furious. The two emissaries had terrifying strength and the Battle King sect behind them. If they attacked Chumu and stole his armor, it would be equivalent to offending the Battle King sect. Offending the Battle King sect didn't matter. They weren't afraid at all. What they were worried about was the terrifying power behind the Battle King sect. It wasn't something they could fight against. The apprehension in their hearts forced them to suppress the fire in their hearts. Chumu's dual swords were incomparably stunning. He relied on his outstanding speed to avoid the pursuit of the 2 6-star middle stage Saint rank experts, and instead charged towards the remaining 9 5-star Saint rank experts. With the 9 5-star martial saints spread out, Chumu could only kill them one by one. With the cloud-piercing sword style, he would definitely kill one of them. With the Dao-severing sword style, he would kill another one. 9 5-star martial saints would only make him waste a little more time. Not long after, the 9 5-star Saint rank experts had all fallen. Chumu turned around and faced the last 2 6-star middle stage Saint rank experts. Under the silver armor, a smile appeared on his face. Raising his 2 swords, Chumu took the initiative to attack amidst the resplendent sword light. Chapter 1592. The silver divine armor reflected a dazzling, silvery white luster under the sunlight. The 2 swords in his hands glowed with divine light. More than a dozen 5-star martial saints died, one after another. Chumu's figure crossed paths with 2 6-star mid-level martial saints in an instant. Sparks flew as they clashed. His figure turned in the air like a swallow flying back. His 2 swords were like a pair of wings as they streaked across the sky. He charged at the 6-star mid-level martial saints on the left at an even faster speed. Chumu's every move attracted everyone's attention, making it impossible for them to look away. The 5 6-star martial saints, who were trapped by the level 4 puppet formation, were still fighting against the puppet formation. Although puppets didn't have much intelligence, their bodies were extremely tough due to the materials they were made from. Their defensive abilities were amazing. As long as their cores weren't destroyed and their energy wasn't depleted, they could continue fighting. Even if their limbs were broken, it wouldn't affect them too much. The 9 4-star martial saints, formed puppets, weren't weak. After forming the level 4 puppet formation, they had the strength of a 6-star martial saint. Moreover, the enemy's attacks would all be diverted and guided by the puppet formation. Only 1/9 of the attacks would actually hit them. The attacks that could originally injure them were no longer a threat after being weakened by 1/9. They didn't know much about the puppet formation and didn't know its secrets. They didn't have Chumu's ability to analyze the puppet formation's flaws, and so on. They could only dodge and counterattack, and their strength was constantly depleted. We have to think of a way to break out of the encirclement. Otherwise, when most of their strength is depleted, only death awaits us. The 5 6-star martial saints looked extremely grim. Although they were just ordinary martial saints, they were still 6-star martial saints. In their respective sects, they enjoyed extremely high authority and status. They were highly respected. Unlike now, they were surrounded by a group of cold, unintelligent puppets and were in imminent danger. On the other side, Chu-Mu was engaged in an intense battle with 2 6-star mid-level martial saints. To everyone's astonishment, Chu-Mu was able to fight against 2 6-star mid-level saint realm experts on his own. For a moment, the 2 6-star mid-level saint realm masters couldn't do anything to Chu-Mu, and Chu-Mu couldn't do anything to them. Both sides were evenly matched. The 2 6-star mid-level martial saints each held a sword in their hands, while their left hands performed a spell. It just so happened that both of them had mastered fire-type magical techniques. As they unleashed their techniques, streams of flames shot out like meteors and fiery meteors, all of which bombarded Chu-Mu. There were no blind spots in all directions. There was nowhere to hide. Chu-Mu stood in the air without moving. His 2 swords suddenly trembled and disappeared in an instant. Only strands of sword light could be seen descending from the sky. They were so dense that they looked like thousands of willows on a riverbank. 1,000 weeping willow sword form. The Akalanatha sword form and the 1,000 weeping willow sword form were the 2 great defensive sword forms that Chu-Mu had comprehended from the forest of 10,000 sword steels. They were also the 2 most powerful defensive sword forms that he had mastered. After a long period of cultivation, Chu-Mu had already mastered these 2 sword forms and comprehended their essence. His primordial spirit had broken through from the peak of the 2nd level to the 3rd level. While his comprehension had improved, he had also experienced a thorough comprehension. His understanding of the various sword forms had deepened. Naturally, his grasp of the essence of the 2 great defensive sword forms had deepened as well. He was only a thin line away from comprehending the true meaning of the sword. However, this thin line was like the distance between the sea and the sky. They seemed to be connected, but they were actually thousands of miles apart. After comprehending the essence, Chu-Mu understood better how to use these 2 defensive sword forms better. He was also glad that he didn't choose to cultivate only one of them. The motionless Wisdom King sword style was more suitable for close combat. In short, it was better for defending against physical attacks. On the other hand, the 1,000 Threads sword style was different. It was more suitable for long-range attacks that were inclined towards energy attacks. At this moment, the attacks of the 2 6-star mid-level martial saints were energy-based attacks. Chu-Mu naturally used the 1,000 Weeping Willow sword form to defend himself. The effect would be better than the Akalanatha sword form. Under the 1,000 Weeping Willow sword style, the flames that bombarded Chu-Mu unceasingly attacked Chu-Mu's body. However, under the thin threads of sword light, they were weakened layer by layer. Before they could even approach Chu-Mu's body, they disappeared without a trace. He blocked it. He actually blocked it. What sword form is that? How can it be so terrifying? The fire-based spells of the 2 6-star mid-level martial saints were extremely powerful. Even a beginner 6-star martial saint wouldn't dare to take it head-on. However, Chu-Mu had blocked it with a single sword form. No, other than the sword form. It must be the power of the armor. That was what everyone thought. Yes, no one believed that a beginner 1-star martial saint would be able to fight against a 6-star mid-level martial saint with his own strength. After defending himself with one move, Chu-Mu took the opportunity to perform the cloud-piercing sword form. Tens of thousands of clouds appeared and locked onto the 2 mid-level 6-star Saint Realm experts. They felt that their movements were affected and became sluggish. Their expressions changed. They had seen how those 5-star Saint Realm experts had died. An extremely condensed sword light pierced through the clouds silently and pierced towards the 6-star mid-level martial saint on the left. Just as he was about to explode with power to counterattack, Chu Mu's eyes flashed. An invisible force shot out at an indescribable speed and shot into the spiritual world of the 6-star mid-level martial saint. A short and thin black needle exuded a chilling aura. It was as if it came from the abyss and descended with the power to take one's life. The soul-piercing needle was a second-grade soul-piercing needle. It was executed by Chu Mu's third-grade primordial spirit. It was even more powerful than a second-grade primordial spirit. Chu Mu didn't expect the soul-piercing needle to be able to destroy the 6-star mid-level martial saint's primordial spirit unless his primordial spirit was at the second grade. However, for a 6-star martial saint, his primordial spirit would be at the third grade or at the very least beginner third grade. This was the case for the primordial spirit. There was a huge difference between each grade of primordial spirit. For example, a third-grade primordial spirit cultivator who didn't cultivate any primordial spirit secret techniques would have a hard time destroying his primordial spirit with a second-grade primordial spirit secret technique. At most, the primordial spirit would have some impact. This was under the condition that the difference in strength between the two parties wasn't too great. If the difference in strength between the two parties was too great, the impact would be reduced infinitely. It could even be resisted. Grades were the iron law. However, the second-grade soul-piercing needle released by Chu Mu's high-grade, third-grade primordial spirit was much more powerful than an ordinary second-grade soul-piercing needle. It tore through layers of divine spirit barriers and shot towards the opponent's primordial spirit. The opponent didn't cultivate any primordial spirit secret technique. He used his early grade, third grade primordial spirit to forcefully resist the attack. His mind was fully focused on his spiritual world and had no time to care about anything else. The consequence of this was that he couldn't resist Chu Mu's sword. The other 6-star mid-level martial saint couldn't save him in time. The speed of the cloud-piercing sword style was too fast. The sword pierced through the air and pierced through the opponent's forehead. The opponent's body trembled. The impact of the attack made his mind unable to concentrate. The soul-piercing needle pierced into the opponent's primordial spirit. With the power of the sword, the opponent's primordial spirit was destroyed and killed. Chu Mu's opponents went from 2 6-star mid-level martial saints to 1. Killed. He actually killed a 6-star mid-level martial saint. Chu Mu naturally wouldn't let go of this 6-star mid-level martial saint. Without hesitation, he used the soul-piercing needle to attack the opponent's primordial spirit. If the soul-piercing needle reached third grade, it would be able to kill the opponent in one strike. However, it was only second grade. Although it couldn't kill the opponent, it could still cause a certain impact. Facing an opponent like Chu Mu, a certain impact was enough to be fatal. The soul-piercing needle's formless impact entered the opponent's spiritual world. The 6-star mid-level martial saint shuddered. Chu Mu's sword had arrived. It was still the cloud-piercing sword style. The cloud-piercing sword style was Chu Mu's fastest sword style. The sword pierced through the clouds and killed the opponent in an instant. 2 6-star mid-level martial saints were both dead. At this point, Chu Mu's opponents were all dead. In this battle and the previous battle, Chu Mu alone had killed 600 martial saints. It was a terrifying scene. Huang Xiaolong was simply a god of death. Of the 5 6-star martial saints trapped by the 4th grade puppet formation, 1 had already died. There were still 4 of them left, and they were still struggling in the corner. This was equivalent to a deathbed struggle. The Battle King Gates, first envoy, and second envoy were still fighting against the 5th grade and 6th grade puppet formations. Chu Mu stopped circulating the Sword God's descent. The battle had been going on for a long time, and the Sword God's descent's energy was almost depleted. At this time, the Battle King Gates' first envoy suddenly barked at the second envoy, "Go." What? The second envoy didn't react in time. "The situation isn't right, go." The first envoy barked again, and a tyrannical force erupted from his body. After resisting the puppet's attack, he borrowed the force to retreat. The second envoy also reacted. Since the first envoy said that the situation wasn't right, he also realized that something was wrong. However, his brain wasn't as agile as the first envoy. Adding on the fact that he was still enraged, he didn't react in time. However, he had always trusted the first envoy. Seeing that the first envoy was about to make a move, he also resisted the puppet's attack and retreated. With a loud bang, he burst out with speed and fled. He ran. What's going on? Why did the Battle King Gates, first envoy, and second envoy run away? Don't tell me they don't care about the other envoys? Only then did everyone realize what had happened. From the time the Battle King Gates, 13 envoys and 6 star martial saints had entered the true sword sect's territory until now, 15 minutes had passed. Comparing their strength to the true sword sect's disciples and true sword sect's disciples. Those who should have been killed, and those who should have been captured should have been captured. But why was there no movement from the Battle King Gates side until now? They didn't see any silhouettes, nor did they hear any sound. It was as if they had left for good. Chapter 1593. High up in the sky, 2 streaks of light were streaking across the sky with incredible speed. One was like a bolt of lightning, and the other was like a shooting star. They were shockingly resplendent. Energy rippled in all directions, shaking the void as they left behind 2 long trails. These 2 figures were the first and second emissaries of the warlord sect. Big brother, why are we leaving? The second emissary still couldn't figure it out. There's an expert in the true sword sect, said the first emissary. Expert? What expert? The second emissary's brain seemed to have grown muscles. I don't know, but there's been no news of the others after they entered. The first emissary's expression was somewhat grave. Only when he heard that did the second emissary begin to react. That's right. Those who entered the true sword sect were all 6-star saints. Even the weakest of the emissaries of the warlord sect was a high 6-star saint. There were a total of 8 emissaries ranked in the top 10. Each one of them had the strength of a peak 6-star saint. They were the kind of experts who could easily kill ordinary peak 6-star saints. So many 6-star saints had entered the true sword sect, but it was like a stone sinking into the ocean. Even after 15 minutes, there was still no movement. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. He hadn't noticed it before. He only thought of it later. There had to be an expert hidden in the true sword sect. That expert was at least a 7-star saint. Furthermore, it wasn't an ordinary 7-star saint. That was why they could kill all those 6-star saints without unleashing their power. If that powerful 7-star saint appeared, the second emissary would be in danger. If the second emissary died, he, as the first emissary, wouldn't have an easy time either. The first emissary made a prompt decision. He immediately retreated. The true sword sect was a very frightening and mysterious power. He had to return and report the situation to the sect master. The second emissary's heart was filled with hatred and anger. However, he also understood why the third emissary hadn't come out after entering the true sword sect and had died inside. There had to be a 7-star saint in the true sword sect, and a powerful 7-star saint at that. The third emissary's primordial spirit attack had reached the peak of level 3. It could be said that no matter how powerful a peak 6-star saint was, as long as they did not have a primordial spirit defense secret technique, they would not be able to withstand it. However, an ordinary 7-star saint had a level 4 primordial spirit, which was a bronze level primordial spirit. The difference between it and a dark iron level primordial spirit was obvious. A bronze grade primordial spirit. Just the bronze grade primordial spirit light alone could withstand a peak rank 3 primordial spirit attack. It was only natural that the third emissary had died in the true sword sect. The true sword sect won't let this go just like that. The second emissary turned around and glanced at the true sword sect in the distance. What a terrifying true sword sect! Everyone glanced at the mountain gate of the real sword sect. It was as if they wanted to see through it, but at the same time it also seemed to contain terrifying secrets that would devour them. It was too mysterious. This sect was constantly overturning everyone's impression of it. It was as if there was a thick layer of fog covering the entire sect. Chu Mu, who was standing in midair, swept up the corpses of the martial saints with his spiritual energy. Instantly, he kept all the corpses of the martial saints into his spatial ring. After losing their targets, the rank 5 puppet formation charged towards the rank 4 puppet formation. The rank 4 puppet formation dispersed. The remaining 4 6-star martial saints were killed by the rank 5 puppet formation. The rank 6 puppet formation appeared beside Chu Mu to protect him. The strength of an 8-star martial saint was enough to intimidate the surrounding people who had evil intentions. This was because the strongest among them was only a 7-star martial saint. They coveted Chu Mu's silver-grade divine equipment, but they were too afraid to make a move. In the end, they could only retreat helplessly. Chu Mu took the spoils of war and returned to the true sword sect. This time the harvest was huge. There were more than 500 martial saints, including the 100 from before. There were more than 600 in total. This was equivalent to more than 600 spatial rings. Every spatial ring contained the collection of a martial saint. It was not shabby at all. More than 600 martial saints' spatial rings, more than 600 collections. This was enough to expand the true sword sect's cultivation resources by a lot. It could be said that in the entire Kanglan dynasty, there was no quasi-second-rate force that could compare with the true sword sect in terms of cultivation resources. It could even be said that among the second-rate forces, there were very few that could compare with the true sword sect in terms of cultivation resources. Right now, the true sword sect's cultivation resources could even be compared with some of the weaker quasi-first-rate forces. Of course, this did not include the resources that Chu Mu possessed. Those were his personal resources. However, the true sword sect's actual level was only a quasi-second-rate force. As a quasi-second-rate force, they could enjoy the cultivation resources of a quasi-first-rate force. Every disciple would receive greater and better training. For example, although those puppets were very powerful, they did not consume the sect's cultivation resources. They only needed powerful energy stones, such as pure yang stones. A single pure yang stone was enough for a 6-star martial saint puppet to fight for an entire day. However, Chu Mu possessed several million pure yang stones. In theory, it was enough for several million 6-star martial saint puppets to fight for an entire day. With several million 6-star martial saints, even an unparalleled expert would not dare to go against them. After entering the sect's main hall, the elders made arrangements for the disciples and hurried into the sect's main hall. Sect leader. The elders were all extremely excited. They had also brought over the corpses of the invading 6-star martial saints. They had personally witnessed the strength of their sect leader. Killing low-level martial saints and even mid-level martial saints was like chopping vegetables. Even 6-star martial saints had died under his sword. He was too powerful. It was indescribable. This was their sect leader. How lucky they were to have such a person as their sect leader. The disciples did not die, right? Chu Mu asked. They are fine. None of them were lost. The elders replied. At the same time, they were very confused. Sect leader, there seems to be other experts in our sect? Yes. Chu Mu replied. However, he did not explain in detail. It was Gul Wankong and the other two. After equipping the heavenly puppets, Gul Wankong and the other two had the strength of a 7-star martial saint. They were hiding in various parts of the true sword sect and were prepared to attack as a surprise attack. However, before they could attack, they were invaded by 6-star martial saints. Naturally, they had to kill them. The difference between a 6-star martial saint and a 7-star martial saint was huge. It was naturally easy to kill them. Therefore, there was no huge commotion. It could be said that it was a trap that Chumu had dug for the Battle King sect's martial saints to jump in. In the end, they really did. Chumu took out more than 500 interspatial rings and handed them to the elders to sort out. Immediately after, he entered the profound Yang sword realm and brought the corpses of more than 500 saint-level experts to the ancient spirit beasts to eat, nourishing their descendants and allowing them to grow faster. Currently, the mystic Yang sword world could not be known to the outside world. However, one day, it would definitely be known. When that time came, the true sword sect would have enough strength to guard it. Moreover, most of the ancient spiritual beasts in the mystic Yang sword world were martial saints. Many of them were 6-star martial saints. To the true sword sect, they were not weak. Chumu went to take a look at the Great Elder. The Great Elder's situation had completely stabilized. The surrounding pure Yang aura was unceasingly pouring into his body, refining it. Then he went to check on Gulwankong and the other two. After chatting for a while, he left. The true sword sect is still too weak. Chumu thought. It could be said that in the battle against the Battle King sect, the true sword sect relied on him, Gulwankong, and the other two. The elders and disciples were completely useless. However, there was nothing they could do about it. The current true sword sect was still too weak. In the past, the 7 hidden great elders were all martial saints. They seemed to be very powerful, but in reality it was not enough. Every powerful sect had a portion of martial saints hidden. The ones that were announced to the outside world were only a small portion. On the other hand, it was also because of the strength of the Battle King sect. If the true sword sect's opponent was only a true quasi-second-rate sect, then the true sword sect's current strength was enough to contend against them. After all, most quasi-second-rate sects only had 1 or 2 6-star martial saints. The strength that the Battle King sect displayed was something that most quasi-second-rate sects could not contend against. The true sword sect's current level was too far away from the quasi-second-rate sects. This was the situation where Chumu was not included. The strength of a sect was not just the strength of an individual. It was the strength of a group. Therefore, the true sword sect had to develop as soon as possible. Chumu decided to open the spiritual pool again and let the 10 esoteric disciples enter one by one to cultivate. Currently, the weakest of the 10 esoteric disciples was at the 6th level of the Nirvana realm, and the strongest was at the 8th level of the Nirvana realm. Chumu's intention was to raise their cultivation to the peak of the 9th level of the Nirvana realm as soon as possible. After that, they would enter the profound Yang sword realm to cultivate in seclusion and consolidate their cultivation. When the time was right, they would break through in one fell swoop, undergo the eternal tribulation, and become a martial saint. Each of them was a true genius. Once they became a martial saint, they would not be ordinary martial saint. Of course, a 1-star martial saint was only at the level of a true expert. Even a genius could only be compared to a 2-star martial saint. In the entire world of martial saint, a low-level martial saint was only in existence at the bottom. Perhaps to those below the martial saint, they were very, very strong and could not be resisted. However, at the level of a true expert, they were in a rather awkward situation. However, everyone started out as a 1-star martial saint, and everyone slowly became stronger. Only by becoming a 1-star martial saint and stepping onto the stage of the strong would they be able to take another step forward and become stronger. While Chumu was thinking about how to better and faster develop the true sword sect, the news about him in the outside world increased. With the strength of a single person, with the strength of a 1-star martial saint, in less than a month, he had killed more than 600 martial saints, from 1-star martial saint to 6-star martial saint, without exception. As a result, he was given the nickname of the Martial Saint Terminator, which was widely known. Chapter 1594. Saint Realm Terminator, how arrogant. Then go and try. Kill hundreds of Saint Realm cultivators who are stronger than you by yourself. If you can do that, you can also get that title. There were some who didn't want to accept it, but there were also some who wanted to accept it. Chu Mu had once become the focus of everyone's attention. He had become the topic of endless discussion. More and more people were interested in him. However, no one dared to approach the real sword sect, and no one dared to approach Chu Mu, because they knew that the hatred between the real sword sect and the Battle King sect was endless. It wasn't over yet. The current situation was that either the real sword sect or the Battle King sect would be destroyed. If the real sword sect was destroyed, then the matter would naturally come to an end. Chu Mu was going to die, so there was no need to try to rope him in. On the other hand, if the Battle King sect was destroyed, then the backer behind the Battle King sect would definitely not let the matter rest. The backer behind the Battle King sect was extremely terrifying. Apart from first-rate powers, no one could resist them. Even some first-rate powers didn't want to provoke them. Therefore, the destruction of True Sword Sect was only a matter of time. Jumping around for a few more days was better than jumping around for a few less days. Unfortunately, Chu Mu, this kind of monster, was like a flash in the pan. The patriarch of the real sword sect, Chu Mu, is indeed a monstrous genius. When the time comes, if he's in a life or death situation, we have to save him. We need monstrous geniuses like him, said someone from the Kanglin imperial family. Strictly speaking, the Kanglin imperial family was a holy land because its founder was the Kanglin imperial family. As a sacred land, they naturally had their own foundation and powerful strength, though they didn't want to directly clash with the War King sect's backer. If they could make Chu Mu, this kind of monster, become a part of their faction and receive large amounts of resources to nurture him, allowing him to quickly grow up without affecting their foundation. In the future, he would definitely become a pillar of support for their faction. With them in charge, their faction would be even more stable. It had to be said that the Kanglin dynasty's plan was pretty good. In fact, there were many forces that had the same idea as the Kanglin dynasty. It was just that they didn't have the confidence to face the forces behind the War King's clan, so they didn't dare to make the decision. Otherwise, they might have to face a terrifying enemy that could annihilate them. No matter how he looked at it, it wasn't a good deal for him to cause the destruction of his own faction because of a monster. He couldn't do it. After the first and second messengers returned, the War King sect didn't send out any news, nor did they do anything. It was as if they had disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Whether it was the True Sword sect or the Battle King sect, they were both quiet, as if they had put aside their hatred. Let go of the hatred? Impossible. This was just the calm before the storm. Instead, it made people feel oppressed. Right now, the Kanglin dynasty's attention was focused on the True Sword sect and the Warlord sect. Within the True Sword sect, within the profound Yang Sword Hall. In my opinion, why don't we take the initiative to attack? Let's kill our way to the War King sect, said Lian Hongyan. That's exactly what I meant. Chu Mu said, get ready, we're leaving for the Battle King sect. No problem. Yang Zhantin grinned. The Battle King sect had attacked the True Sword sect twice, but they had only attacked once. The enemy wasn't strong enough, so they were itching for a fight. Now, it was the True Sword sect's turn to attack the Battle King sect. Not long after, the saint-level experts of the various sects hiding around the True Sword sect discovered that a flying ship had flown out of the True Sword sect. They didn't know who was inside the flying ship, nor did they know how many people there were. That was because the flying ship had activated a seal that blocked the detection of spiritual energy. Unless it was a high-level saint, no one would be able to pass through. Those high-level saints had noble statuses. How could they stay here to monitor? Those who stayed behind were mostly low-level saints. Where is that flying ship going? After analyzing the various routes, they finally came to a shocking conclusion. The flying ship's destination was the Battle King sect. They were 70% sure. The True Sword sect had taken the initiative to attack the Battle King sect? Were they going to ask for peace or take revenge? It was definitely the latter. At this point, how could the True Sword sect ask for peace? Even if they did, the Battle King sect wouldn't accept it. One side would have to be exterminated. The flying ship quickly left the True Sword sect. The True Sword sect closed its gates and activated its formation. It didn't take long for many flying ships and many Saint-level experts to follow the True Sword sect's flying ships and leave quickly. There was still some distance between the True Sword sect and the Battle King sect. 2 days later, the flying ship arrived outside the Battle King sect. When the ship's door opened, countless gazes fell on it. They wanted to see just who the True Sword sect had dispatched this time. After all, in the True Sword sect they knew, only the True Sword sect's sect Master Chu Mu was worthy of their attention. However, Chu Mu's strength was unable to contend against a 7-star Saint rank expert, unless his puppet arrays were comparable to 7-star and 8-star saints. Did Chu Mu come with 2 puppet formations this time? After thinking about it, they didn't think so. After all, the previous battle had shown that the 2 powerful puppet formations couldn't do anything to the first and second emissaries of the Battle King sect. According to what they knew, there was another sect master in the Battle King sect. He was a mysterious sect master. No one knew how strong he was. He might be a 7-star saint, but he might be an 8-star saint. He might even be a 9-star saint. If Chu Mu had brought 2 puppet formations here, the result would have been death. If it wasn't Chu Mu who came with 2 puppet formations, who could it be? Everyone couldn't help but think of the expert hiding in the True Sword sect. Could it be that he wasn't a 7-star saint, but an 8-star saint? The answer would be revealed soon. Everyone stared at the flying ship's door eagerly, waiting for the person to appear. He appeared. As expected, he appeared. However, the result was shocking and puzzling. For silhouettes appeared from the flying ship. Puppets. No, they look like puppets, but they aren't puppets. They look more like strange armor. That's not right. There are 4 of them. Each of them is a 6-star saint. They can't pose a threat to the Battle King sect. Everyone was puzzled. They didn't know if they were puppets or if there were people inside. People of the Battle King sect come out and die. Soon, they realized that it was a person wearing a strange armor. The one who spoke was Lian Hongyan. He pointed his sparkling red sword at the Battle King sect. A red sword light shot out and slashed towards the Battle King sect. Under his sword, the mountain gate was split into pieces. This was a blatant provocation. The people hiding in the distance were dumbfounded. A 6-star saint dared to provoke the Battle King sect. Wasn't he courting death? The 4th elder of the Shrouded Sun Valley, a 7-star saint, was killed by the 2nd emissary of the Battle King sect in 3 punches. A 6-star saint wouldn't even be able to withstand a single finger. You actually dare to come here. A furious roar sounded. Soon after, a golden light soared into the sky from the War King sect. Within the golden light was a strong man who looked like a metal tower. The 2nd emissary of the Battle King sect had appeared. "Come, take my sword," Lian Hongyun said excitedly. Before, when he was hiding in the True Sword sect, he could clearly see the battle outside. He had a simple understanding of the strength of the 2nd envoy of the Battle King sect. He knew that the 2nd envoy was extremely strong. He was at the peak of the 7-star saint layer. Only such a strong cultivator could make him fight to his heart's content. The sparkling and translucent red longsword was over 2 meters long. As it slashed down, a resplendent red sword light tore through the sky and shot towards the 2nd envoy of the Battle King sect. The other 3 didn't move at all. They just watched from the side. The red sword light shot towards the 2nd emissary of the Battle King sect. The 2nd emissary's expression immediately changed because he sensed that it wasn't the strength of a 6-star saint. It was the strength of a 7-star saint. Chu Mu and the others had a deeper understanding of the heavenly puppets. They could already unleash the strength of a 7-star saint while releasing the chi of a 6-star saint. It seems like you're the 7-star saint hiding in the True Sword sect. You deserve to die. The second emissary roared the last 3 words. It sounded like the fury of an ancient beast. The second emissary of the Battle King sect thought about the death of the third emissary and the other emissaries. They had all died in the True Sword sect. Moreover, it was very likely that they had all died under the sword of the man in front of them. Thinking about that, the second emissary of the Battle King sect's heart was filled with hatred and anger. The flames of anger burned his eyes until they turned scarlet red. Terrifying berserk energy surged within his body like an erupting volcano. It soared into the sky, causing the void to tremble. The air turned into torrential waves that spread out in all directions. A 7-star saint's chi soared into the sky. The second emissary of the Battle King sect had a pair of fiery red gloves appear on his hands. He immediately punched out. It seemed like he wasn't proficient in sword techniques. He was only proficient in using his fists to attack. Together with the gloves, his power was extremely shocking. He punched out, and the terrifying energy immediately shattered the red sword light. The other fist flew towards Lian Hongyan. It was extremely violent. It created a vacuum in the void. Nobody doubted that if they were hit, they would be torn apart. At the critical moment, Lian Hongyan, who was in the red evil heavenly puppet, smiled. It was a smile that made one's blood boil. Good. Lian Hongyan controlled the red evil heavenly puppet, and in an instant it quickly dodged. It narrowly avoided the terrifying fist energy. Then it raised its sword and slashed out. The power of this sword was even more powerful. The red sword light that pierced through the sky let everyone know that it was the power of a 7-star saint. Chapter 1595. So, he is at the peak of the 7-star saint level. I thought he was at the 6-star saint level. Peak of the 7-star saint level. There will definitely be an intense battle. I wonder who will win in the end. This is no longer a battle of victory or defeat. It is a battle of life and death. Sometimes victory and death were not the same. Feeling the power that Lian Hongyan unleashed, the second emissary of the Battle King sect was even more certain that he was the one who killed the third emissary and the other 13 emissaries of the Battle King sect. This was hatred, a hatred of life and death. It would not stop until one of them was dead. As his anger rose, the air around the second emissary of the Battle King sect seemed to be ignited. Lian Hongyan was not afraid at all. The heavenly puppet's defense was shocking. Even if it was hit directly by the second emissary, it would not be damaged. Even if it was slightly damaged, the heavenly puppet would be able to recover naturally. Furthermore, the heavenly puppet was at the peak of the 7-star saint level. In addition, they had improved during this period of time and were more familiar with controlling the heavenly puppet. They could definitely fight with the second emissary of the Battle King sect. Lian Hongyan and the second emissary of the Battle King sect started an intense battle. Terrifying sword light and fist force spread out in all directions. Everything within a few thousand meters was affected. Even the mid-level and low-level saints were unable to escape unscathed. Chu Mu, Gulwankong, and Yang Zhantian were in the middle of the battle. They were only a few hundred meters away from the intense battle. The terrifying shockwaves did not affect them at all. However, there were people who noticed the 3 of them. That red guy is at the peak of the 7-star saint level. What about the other 3? Are they the same? If they were all at the peak of the 7-star saint level, it would be understandable for them to attack the Battle King sect. However, the first emissary of the Battle King sect is at the 8-star saint level. There is also a mysterious sect leader of the Battle King sect. Even if the 4 7-star saints worked together, they would not be able to defeat the 8-star saint level. They did not know who the person under the 4 strange armors was, but they were very curious. "Where is the first emissary? Come out and fight with me." Chu Mu controlled the heaven puppet and said, after being emitted by the celestial puppet, his voice carried a unique metallic texture. It was as cold as the edge of a sword. Those who had heard Chu Mu's voice would not be able to tell his identity. With 2 swords on his back, he gave off a very unique feeling. Instantly, he became the focus of attention. Even Lian Hongyun and the second emissary, who were fighting fiercely, were ignored. Sword will emanated from the desolate, heavenly puppet's body, and an indestructible aura filled the air. Immediately after, a sharp glint, an extremely sharp glint that seemed to be able to rip the sky apart, shot out from Battle King Sek's mountain gate. Like a sharp lightning bolt, it ripped the sky apart. With a kacha sound, it brought with it a boundless sword light as it shot towards Chu Mu. Incomparably dense killing intent and incomparably sharp sharpness pierced through and tore through everything. It could be said to be extremely terrifying. If Chu Mu was really just an ordinary 7-star saint level expert, he would definitely not be able to withstand this sudden attack. There was a 70% chance that he would be killed and a 30% chance that he would be injured. However, although the heaven puppet's power was at the peak of 7-star saint level, Chu Mu's attainments in the way of the sword could not be compared to an ordinary 7-star saint level expert. For example, a heaven-level genius like Xia Jinkong, a powerful sword saint who could kill an 8-star saint level expert as a 7-star saint. His sword power was only at level 7 before he met Chu Mu. It was only because of Chu Mu's guidance that his sword power rose to level 8. Although sword power was not absolute, it directly reflected a swordsman's attainments in the way of the sword. The way of the sword also reflected the attainments in the way of the sword. At this moment, Chu Mu's sword power was at level 9, and it was at the peak of level 9. It was already the limit of sword power that was known. The extremely profound attainments in the way of the sword and the power of a 7-star saint level expert brought about an increase that surpassed the limit. Previously, in the ancient sacred city, Chu Mu was able to fight against an 8-star saint rank initial stage when riding the Heaven Wasteland heavenly puppet. He was at a slight disadvantage, but he was still undefeated. After the trip to the ancient sacred city, he had absorbed the fruits of his labor. Although his cultivation hadn't increased, his primordial spirit was more powerful, and his other aspects had increased. His strength was stronger than before, and he was able to control the Heaven Wasteland heavenly puppet more easily. In the face of this extremely powerful attack, Chu Mu did not panic. Although there were many exclamations around him, it did not affect him at all. The 2 swords flew from the back of the heaven puppet and landed in Chu Mu's hands. The melodious sound of the swords filled the air. The 2 swords crossed and collided. Countless sparks flew. In the friction, there were even more sparks that were as bright as fireworks. Slash! The 2 swords slashed out from the front and back. 2 huge sword lights that looked like they were made of metal were slashed out. They slashed out towards the terrifying sword light that was coming towards him. When the 2 swords collided, terrifying sword chi spread out in all directions, slicing through the void. Countless cracks appeared in the void. Gu Luankong and Yang Zhantian quickly retreated. They were not afraid of the shock waves from the battle between Lian Hongyun and the second envoy of the Battle King sect. However, the shock waves from the battle between Chu Mu and the first envoy of the Battle King sect were too terrifying. They did not dare to take the shock waves head-on. The golden figure approached the silver, heavenly wasteland, heavenly puppet. As they came into close contact, an intense battle began. Most of the sword saints were proficient in close combat. Only a few sword saints were proficient in long-range attacks. However, no matter what kind of sword saint it was, they were all proficient in close combat. It was a kind of foundation. Speaking of which, long-range sword techniques were sometimes not as flexible as close-range combat. Battle King Sek's #1 emissary was most proficient in close combat. He also specialized in close combat and didn't specialize in long-range sword techniques. Chu Mu, on the other hand, was also proficient in close combat. What kind of battle would it be when two sword saints, who are both good at close combat, meet each other and have similar levels of strength? When the two of them started their intense battle, they immediately attracted everyone's attention. While Gu Wankong and Yang Zhantian retreated far away, they did not dare to take their eyes off the battle. It was a rare opportunity to watch two powerful sword saints fight at such a close distance. If they could personally fight, the effect would be even better. However, they were not strong enough. Chu Mu had such thoughts. When he saw the first envoy of the Battle King sect fighting against the 6th rank puppet outside the True Sword sect, he had an idea to fight against the first envoy of the Battle King sect personally. There were not many powerful sword saints. Chu Mu did not have enough time to form the true four symbols, sword formation, and kill his opponent. The power of the four symbols sword array was extremely strong. With the four of them together, it was enough to contend against a 9-star saint. No matter how strong the Battle King sect's number 1 envoy was, he was at most equivalent to an 8-star saint. Under the four symbols sword array, he would be easily killed. So scary. Sword saints are too terrifying. If you fight against them, you will either die or be injured. Sword cultivators are like this. They pursue attacking power, especially those who are proficient in close combat. Once they get close, their sword will explode with terrifying power. The battle between two powerful sword saints is too dangerous and exciting. Look, if you are even slightly affected by that sword, you will definitely lose a layer of skin. The Saint Realm experts who were watching from afar were discussing. Their expressions changed drastically and they looked very nervous, especially those who tried to put themselves in the battle. They were even more shocked. Their bodies were trembling and they were sweating profusely. Terrifying. That sword edge was simply too terrifying. The battle between Chu Mu and the first envoy of the Battle King sect was incomparably dangerous. Their swords were extremely sharp, and they could pierce through and cut through everything. Neither of them dared to let the other's sword hit them. They were constantly dodging, blocking, and counterattacking. In the void, both of them displayed unparalleled dodging abilities. They were dodging within a small range, and their swords were constantly clashing. The first envoy of the Battle King sect sword force was at the 7th level, while Chu Mu's sword force was at the 9th level. Using such a powerful sword energy continuously would consume a lot of stamina. The first envoy did not make a sound. His eyes were incomparably sharp. The sword in his hand slashed again and again. His sword was more proficient in slashing. Chu Mu discovered that the first emissary's slash attack had already reached a very high level. It was a level that was about to touch upon the true meaning of slash. Unfortunately, the chances of him comprehending the true meaning of slash was very, very low. There wasn't even a 1 in 10,000 chance. The reason was simple. True meaning was something that only the ancient Sword Dao had. The Sword Dao that he cultivated belonged to the current Sword Dao. All the Sword Dao knowledge was passed down in the current era. Unless he understood the ancient Sword Dao and had a certain amount of research, he would need the guidance of someone who had already comprehended the true meaning of the sword. Otherwise, he would never be able to comprehend the true meaning of the sword. The first emissary was a genius himself. That was why he was able to fight against an 8-star saint rank middle stage as a 7-star saint rank peak. Chu Mu was a monster. Unfortunately, the heavenly puppet's 7-star saint rank peak strength was normal strength. It was equivalent to a human's 7-star saint rank peak strength. They clashed again and again. Countless sparks, sword light, and sword chi were created. The first envoy blocked Chu Mu's slash. Borrowing the force, he retreated slightly. At the same time, he raised his sword and slashed down. Incomparably resplendent sword light gathered on the sword. The 7th level sword force completely erupted. A sharp light that was close to comprehending the true meaning of slashing overflowed. it was incomparably shocking. He used a tyrannical sword technique. Chu Mu used both of his swords to parry. An incomparably powerful force unceasingly collided with the two swords and the heavenly puppet. Fortunately, the heavenly puppet's material was tough and resisted the impact of the force. In addition to Chu Mu's defensive technique, it was not injured. Chu Mu also took advantage of the gap after the opponent used a powerful sword technique. Thousands of clouds appeared and spread out. The expression of the first envoy of the Battle King sect changed. He recognized this move and also knew how powerful it was. Chapter 1596. Under the true meaning of piercing. Chu Mu's sword was incomparably powerful. Cloud-piercing sword style. It was one of the two swords of the sky puppet of desolation. They were more than 2 meters long, silver, and cold. All the power, under the control of the eternal sword will, condensed on the sword blade, turned into a line and finally gathered at the tip of the sword. It was incomparably sharp, piercing through everything. The first emissary's expression changed greatly. Without any hesitation, he exploded with power and performed a defensive sword technique. He raised his sword like a stick of incense in front of him. The well-practiced move accurately blocked Chu Mu's sword. Cloud-piercing sword style was blocked for the first time. The powerful force penetrated. Under the impact of the shock, the first emissary couldn't take it head-on and kept retreating. What a powerful sword technique! What is it called? The first emissary spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a bit of fanaticism from his expression and tone. Chu Mu could tell that this person was a sword saint who was fanatical about swordsmanship. Cloud-piercing, Chu Mu said faintly. Cloud-piercing. Good, take my void-splitting move. The first emissary's tone became more fanatical. The light that shot out from his eyes became more intense. He raised his sword and slashed out. In an instant, all the power in his body was mobilized. Under the control of the thunderclap, sword will, the sword force and all the power were poured into the sword, turning into a terrifying power that could tear the void. With a slash of the sword, the space under the sword was directly cut open, revealing a straight black color, emitting a heart-palpitating wave. Void-splitting move. This was definitely a very powerful move. Chu Mu could tell. He knew that the other party's sword couldn't be taken head-on like before. However, this sword was very fast and the distance was very close. Its power was extremely strong, and its momentum was shocking. One could tell just by looking at the black color that was cut open. With a swing of the two swords, his body stood in the void without moving, as if he had taken root in the void. Then, arms appeared around Chu Mu, each holding a sword. Akalanatha, sword style. Void-splitting move. Akalanatha sword style defense. The first emissary was shocked. The Void Splitter was the most powerful attack among all the sword techniques that he had mastered. Unless he used a secret technique, he would not be able to display a sword technique that was more powerful than the one he had just displayed. With such a powerful sword strike, he was confident that he could severely injure or even kill an 8-star saint level beginner level expert. The other party blocked it, and it didn't seem to be too difficult. Unmovable Ming King sword style was a purely defensive sword style. It had powerful defensive abilities, especially when Chu Mu grasped its essence. After using it, he could defend against attacks that surpassed his own limits. The might of the Void Splitter had indeed exceeded the limits of the heavenly puppet's strength. Ordinary defenses would not be able to block it, but the immovable Wisdom King sword style could. The first emissary paused for a moment when his sword was ineffective. Chu Mu also paused for a moment when he used the Akalanatha sword style. Although it was very short, he couldn't do anything else during the pause. When both parties reacted at the same time, the first emissary appeared again. His body split into 12 figures and appeared around Chu Mu, surrounding him. 12 figures and 12 swords, all as if they were real, immediately attacked Chu Mu. Chu Mu once again used the Akalanatha sword style to defend. One after another, the swords slashed in all directions, and one after another, the swords defended against the attacks. Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched. He can defend like this. It's too shocking. What sword move is that? No matter how the first emissary attacked, he still couldn't break Chu Mu's defense. Chu Mu also felt that under such a life-and-death battle, his understanding of the Akalanatha sword style deepened. Originally, he had already mastered the essence of the Akalanatha sword style and the Thousand Willow sword style. As his primordial spirit reached level 3, his understanding deepened and reached the peak. He was only a step away from understanding the true meaning of defense. However, this step sometimes required a long time to break through. Today, the battle with the first emissary of the War King sect was a good opportunity to understand the true meaning of defense. This was also one of the reasons why Chu Mu wanted to battle with the first emissary. The best way to quickly understand it was to have a strong enough opponent in a life-and-death battle to give him enough pressure. If this continues, I will be able to understand the true meaning of defense. At that time, whether it's the Akalanatha sword style or the Thousand Willow sword style, the defensive power will increase by a lot. Chu Mu thought the first emissary seemed to be possessed by a demon. He had a kind of obsession, as if he wanted to break through Chu Mu's defense. After attacking repeatedly, he still couldn't break through Chu Mu's defense. With a boom, an incomparably powerful energy exploded from the first emissary's body. The first emissary's aura rose sharply, increasing by more than 5 times. His strength also increased by 5 times. With his strength increased by 5 times, the first emissary once again split into 12 figures, surrounding Chu Mu and launching an intense attack. With the increase of 5 times, the pressure on Chu Mu immediately increased. Originally, he hadn't moved an inch, but now he felt like he was struggling. He clenched his teeth and used the Akalanatha sword style to hold on. He calmed his mind and carefully sensed the profoundness of the sword style. The Akalanatha sword style wasn't just a simple block. It focused on blocking. At the same time, it also needed to divert the force and then disperse it. It was a very complicated process, and it required an extremely high control of the user's strength. Otherwise, it would be impossible to bring out the essence of the sword style. Carefully sensing, blocking, diverting, and dissipating the force, Chu Mu gradually entered the zone. Both sides were fighting. One side was attacking with all their might, the other side was defending with all their might. It was a completely different situation from before. The first emissary seemed to have realized that his opponent was using him to practice the sword. If it was someone else, they might have stopped and prevented Chu Mu from doing as he wished. However, the first emissary didn't do so. He had a kind of fanaticism, a kind of obsession, a desire to see more sword styles. Even if he had to fulfill his opponent's wish, he wouldn't hesitate. Time and time again, he blocked the attacks, time and time again using the Akalanatha sword style. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt as if something had broken. The barrier in his mind disappeared, and everything became clear. Akalanatha sword style! When he used it again, a strange light flowed into the 2 swords, emitting a unique energy fluctuation, as if it could defend against any attack. This was a very unfamiliar energy. It was also the first time that Chu Mu felt this kind of energy. However, he immediately understood that this was the power of the sword defense true, meaning that he had always wanted to comprehend. Although it was only a preliminary comprehension of the power of the sword defense true meaning, the power of the Akalanatha sword style immediately increased exponentially. Under the first emissary's attack, Chu Mu used the Akalanatha sword style to firmly defend against it. In other words, the Akalanatha sword style that was used under the control of the heavenly puppet of desolation could withstand the attack of the middle level of the 8-star Martial Saint level. The first emissary attacked continuously several times, but still couldn't do anything to Chu Mu. Instead, It allowed Chu Mu to deepen his understanding and mastery of the sword defense true meaning. The two swords vibrated. After blocking the opponent's attack, he instantly counterattacked with his sword. After comprehending the sword defense true meaning, the pause in using the Akalanatha sword style was shortened again. The first emissary was repelled. After a long period of high-intensity attacks, his breathing was a little rapid. "You are very strong, but you can't do anything to me." Chu Mu lowered his two swords naturally and said to the first emissary of the Battle King's sect. Speaking of which, he didn't have any bad feelings towards the first emissary of the Battle King's sect. On the contrary, the other party's fanaticism towards the sword gave him a good impression. "You can't do anything to me," the first emissary said. "You will know very soon." Chu Mu smiled and said, "Now, I will give you a chance to choose. Submit to me, and I will teach you the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword." When Chu Mu said, "Submit to me," the first emissary revealed a trace of undetectable disdain. However, when Chu Mu said the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword, the first emissary's expression changed greatly. There was a storm in his heart. Practicing the sword was a matter of sincerity and fanaticism towards the sword. The sword was his pursuit, his life. For the sake of the sword, he could give up a lot. If he was free, he would most likely agree to Chu Mu's request. However, he wasn't free. He had been raised from a young age. Although he had his own thoughts, will, and pursuits, he was also bound by his own restrictions. "It's fine if you don't submit to me, but swear on the way of the sword to join my true sword sect and become a member of the true sword sect. If you are loyal to the true sword sect, I will teach you the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword." Chu Mu changed the condition. The first emissary's eyes flashed with hesitation. There were very few things that could tempt him, but the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword was definitely one of them. He had also heard that the ancient way of the sword was more complete and profound than the current way of the sword. It could be said that the current way of the sword was actually a part of the ancient way of the sword. It was incomplete because a part was missing. He had always been pursuing the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword, but he had never found it. Now, it was very likely that the person in front of him had grasped the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword. As long as he joined the true sword sect and was loyal to the true sword sect, he would be able to obtain the true meaning of the ancient way of the sword. It was completely worth it. However, the first emissary was still hesitating. He still couldn't let go. Chu Mu vaguely understood when he saw the first emissary's expression. He didn't try to persuade him anymore. "You can leave now. Next, the Battle King sect will be destroyed," Chu Mu said. His tone of certainty made the first emissary feel that Lin Fan definitely had a trump card, a powerful trump card. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so confident. Although he said that the first emissary had no intention of leaving, he had his mission, his responsibility, and he had to complete it. "I would like to see how you will destroy my Battle King sect." Suddenly, a loud and clear voice rang out from within the Battle King sect. Following that, a golden figure slowly walked out of the void. Every step he took seemed to be teleporting. At the same time, a powerful aura spread out. Chapter 1597. Step by step, step by step, step by step. There seemed to be waves flashing under his feet. It was as if he was walking on waves. His aura soared, surging endlessly. His momentum was vast, as if he was carrying an ocean. Behind him, there seemed to be an endless ocean with countless waves. As he stepped forward, the waves became clearer and more condensed, and his aura rose even further. Chu Mu only felt that the person walking over step by step seemed to have walked out of an endless ocean. He was carried by the endless ocean. The void around him seemed to be gradually filled and swallowed by the ocean. It became an invisible ocean. Being in the ocean, Chu Mu, Gulwan Kong, and the other three all felt as if they had really fallen into the ocean. It was a strange feeling. There seemed to be an invisible force that was faintly affecting them, forming a slight restriction. Primordial spirit form. What a strong primordial spirit form. He has already reached the peak of the second step. He is only a step away from the third step. The saint-level experts in the distance were only low-level and mid-level saint-level experts. Soon after, a 7-star saint-level expert rushed over. The insight of a 7-star saint-level expert was naturally not something those mid-level and low-level saint-level experts could compare to. High-level martial saints could already evolve the primordial spirit form. It was also known as the Dharma form. When a 7-star martial saint reached the 7-star martial saint level, the primordial spirit form would begin to take shape. At this time, the primordial spirit form would be very weak. It would not be of much help to the body, and it would be easily affected by the outside world. Once it was affected by the outside world, it could affect the body's primordial spirit and cause negative effects. Under normal circumstances, an 8-star martial saint could usually raise the primordial spirit form to the second step. The second step primordial spirit form would be further condensed and released. It would no longer be affected by the outside world. In fact, it could even affect the outside world to a certain extent. The primordial spirit form of the third step was usually only mastered by a 9-star martial saint. The primordial spirit form of the third step was even more powerful and condensed. Not only could it affect the external environment, but it could also further affect the target's actions. There were normal situations, but there were also exceptions. Some 8-star saint-level experts' primordial spirit avatar was still at the first step. The level of the primordial spirit avatar was not the key to a high-level saint-level expert's breakthrough. However, 8-star saint-level experts could easily cultivate their primordial spirit avatar from the first step to the second step. Moreover, there were some true geniuses who could cultivate their primordial spirit to the second step when they were 7-star saints. It was said that the primordial spirit of a peerless powerhouse could even kill their enemies. 8-star saint-level pinnacle. Sect master. Seeing the newcomer, the first emissary flew over and bowed. Sovereign. He's the mysterious sect master of the Battle King sect. A peak 8-star saint whose primordial spirit has reached the peak of the second step. How powerful! Not all peak stage 8-star saint-level powerhouses could reach the peak of the second step in their primordial spirits. First of all, this had to do with the level of their primordial spirits. It also had to do with the application of one's aura. It also had to do with some talent. The sect master of the Battle King sect was a peak 8-star martial saint. He had grasped the peak of the second step of the primordial spirit. He was definitely one of the strongest 8-star martial saints. Danger! Everyone thought so. The first emissary looked at Chu Mu with a look of pity. No matter how powerful a peak stage 7-star martial saint was, he was at most equivalent to a mid-level 8-star martial saint. How could he be a match for a peak stage 8-star martial saint? Moreover, although the sect master was only a peak stage 8-star martial saint, his true strength was extremely powerful. He was comparable to, or even stronger than a low-level 9-star martial saint. Among the martial saints, the difference between each star level was even greater. For example, if a 1-star martial saint was comparable to a 3-star martial saint, after he reached the 7-star martial saint level, he might not be able to surpass 2 stars to rival a 9-star martial saint. He would only be comparable to the most common high-level 8-star martial saint or even the peak of the 8-star martial saint. Therefore, it was already very powerful for a peak stage 8-star martial saint to be comparable to, or even defeat a low-level 9-star martial saint. No one who could become a 9-star martial saint would be an ordinary person. On the path of cultivation, the further one progressed, the more difficult it would be. Some geniuses would even be stuck and unable to break through. It's you guys who have brought great losses to my Battle King sect. The sect master of the Battle King sect walked over step by step. The void seemed to be affected by his primordial spirit, as if it was about to turn into a vast ocean. His voice sounded like the roar of the ocean. When people face the power of nature, they would always feel shocked. Standing in front of the ocean, looking at the endless waves and listening to the roar of the waves, they would feel shocked and even afraid. At this moment, when the sect master of the Battle King's sect opened his mouth, his voice was like the roar of the ocean. The martial saints in the distance were all shocked and trembled uncontrollably. It was too terrifying. It was as if they were facing the fury of the ocean. Chu Mu was also shocked, but he did not lose his composure. He was still able to withstand it. The heavenly puppet's strength was at the peak of the 7-star martial saint level. It was very stable and could not surpass this limit. However, the heavenly puppet's unbelievable characteristics gave it the ability of a peak stage 7-star martial saint. Its virtual primordial spirit had reached the 4th level, and it was not inferior to a peak stage 7-star martial saint in any aspect. Chu Mu was proficient in using 20% of one's strength or even more. Under Chu Mu's control, the heavenly puppet's strength would be even more tyrannical. I'm very curious. What is the background of the Battle King sect? Why are the first-rate factions not willing to attack you? Chu Mu said. His voice was still as cold as the tip of a sword. You don't want to know. The sect master of the Battle King sect said, You don't have the right to know. Set up the formation. Chu Mu said. His voice spread out into Gu Luankong's ears, into Yang Zhantian's ears, and also into Lian Hongyun's ears, who was fighting intensely with the second envoy. They had already comprehended the true meaning of sword defense. One of the goals of this trip was completed, which was to fight the first envoy of the Battle King sect. The second goal was also completed. Now, it was time for the final goal, which was to destroy the Battle King sect. As expected, the sect master of the Battle King sect was an 8-star martial saint, and a peak stage 8-star martial saint. With such strength, they could not fight against him at all. They could only set up the formation. Lian Hongyun retreated and quickly moved towards Chu Mu. Gu Luankong and Yang Zhantian also moved quickly and approached Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them stood in their respective positions in the void. Azure Dragon position, White Tiger position, Vermilion Bird position, Black Tortoise position. The true 4 divisions sword formation was completed. It was so fast that the sect master of the Battle King sect could not stop it in time. Under the true 4 divisions sword formation, everyone's aura underwent an obvious change. Chu Mu was in the Azure Dragon position, and he was the main attacker. The true 4 divisions sword formation combined the strength of the 4 people and used a mysterious method to create an even stronger force. Raising both swords, he slashed out in an instant. The silver sword light was cold and bright, causing the expression of the sect master of the Battle King sect to change drastically. Strong, very strong. This was a sword that belonged to a 9-star martial saint. The sect master of the Battle King sect did not dare to take it head-on. He was indeed very strong. He immediately dodged, passing through the 2-sword light. A slightly curved sword appeared in his hand, and he raised it up high, slashing towards Chu Mu. The golden-red sword light was highly condensed, and that sword seemed to be able to split the sky. It was many times stronger than the Void Ren that the first envoy had used. The strength of an 8-star martial saint was fully displayed under the sword. However, it was still not enough to threaten Chu Mu. He did not dodge, and only raised his sword to block the attack. The other sword pierced out, and a myriad of clouds appeared, spreading out. With the strength of a 7-star martial saint, the power of the cloud-piercing sword style became even stronger. The first envoy's expression changed drastically, and the second envoy did not dare to step forward because the difference in strength was too great. The Battle King sect's sect master's face turned cold, and his pupils shrank rapidly. This sword made him feel a life and death crisis. He ignored everything and dodged. The golden robe on the Battle King sect master's body flickered, and Chu Mu's sword pierced through it. The Battle King sect master's body turned into an afterimage as he rapidly retreated. However, there was still a trace of blood that splashed out. That was blood, the blood of the Battle King sect master. His left arm was injured. Golden robe dislocation. The first envoy's eyes narrowed, and he looked extremely shocked. Golden robe dislocation. It was a very ordinary name, but it represented the peak of the movement techniques of their sect. It was a powerful secret technique that allowed one to step into the realm of movement techniques. The first envoy had yet to reach this level, but the sect master had. The golden robe dislocation allowed one to use their robe to withstand a fatal attack. Chu Mu was also shocked because he was confident that his sword would definitely kill the Battle King sect master. He didn't expect that the Battle King sect master would be able to dodge it. A very exquisite body path secret technique. Chu Mu thought to himself, there was sword Tao in the sword, primordial spirit Tao in the primordial spirit Tao, and naturally there was also movement Tao. Entering the Tao was an extremely high level, especially for movement Tao and footwork Tao, which were even more difficult. For a moment, Chu Mu was extremely interested in the Battle King sect master's move. If he could learn it, it could save his life at a critical moment. However, the Battle King sect master would not teach it to him. Without hesitation, Chu Mu attacked with his third sword. Tao severing sword style. One sword could cut through the Tao. A dense aura spread out, and the world was filled with the Tao. Chu Mu's sword slashed down, and that silver light carried the ruthlessness of the Tao, as if it could even cut through the Tao. The Battle King sect master couldn't block this sword. The golden robe dislocation was indeed powerful, but unfortunately it could only be used once in a short period of time and couldn't be used a second time. After exhausting all of his strength to block it, his sword was broken, and Chu Mu's sword slashed down from head to toe. The silver sword light brought with it a spray of blood that splashed across the sky. Recommend book. I don't know the author of this book, and he didn't ask me for help. I'm recommending this book because I think it's pretty good and it's worth reading. The title of the book is The Man at the Top of the Food Chain. It's a book about the main character who transformed from a weakling with a strong sense of justice into a demon king. He's cold, powerful, and decisive in killing. It's very refreshing. If you haven't read it yet, you can read it. Chapter 1598. The Battle King sect had been destroyed. It was the True Sword sect that had destroyed the Battle King sect. Actually, this was only one piece of news, but it was like two pieces of news. It brought great shock to all the factions in the Kanglan dynasty. The destruction of the Battle King sect was a great shock. The one who had destroyed the Battle King sect was not a first-rate faction, nor was it a quasi-first-rate faction. It was the True Sword sect, a quasi-second-rate faction. A quasi-second-rate faction? If anyone still thought that the True Sword sect was a quasi-second-rate faction, they would spit on their faces. Have you ever seen a quasi-second-rate force that could instantly kill a 7-star Martial Saint expert, kill an 8-star Martial Saint expert at the peak of the Martial Saint realm in 3 strikes, and annihilate a quasi-first-rate force? The True Sword sect is too strong. Who were those 4 people that day? I can't see their faces. I wonder who they are. Also, what kind of armor are they wearing? The True Sword sect is finished. A storm was brewing in the Kanglan dynasty. It was called the True Sword sect. All the topics were related to the True Sword sect. The powerful True Sword sect was unstoppable. To a certain extent, the True Sword sect had a 9-star saint expert. The Battle King sect has been destroyed? That's great. They're finally destroyed. In the True Sword sect, the saint experts and disciples were all stunned when they heard the news. Then they became excited and overjoyed. The powerful Battle King sect was like a sword hanging over their heads. It constantly threatened them and brought them great pressure. At the same time, it also brought them great motivation. It made them work even harder to cultivate and be in a better state than usual. However, cultivating under such great pressure would bring them great benefits in a short period of time, but in the long run it would cause negative effects. Now that the Battle King sect had been destroyed, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Their tense nerves also relaxed, bringing with them waves of exhaustion. As long as they had enough rest, the exhaustion would disappear and be replaced by energy. They were also very curious. Who were the rumored 4 people wearing strange armor? They were only sure that one of them was their sect master. They didn't see it with their own eyes, so they didn't know if their sect master was in seclusion or had left the true sword sect. Inside the profound Yang Sword World's Boundary Monument Hall, Chu Mu was tidying up the Battle King sect's sect master's spatial ring. One of his goals was to find out if the Battle King sect's sect master had used that time to dodge his cloud-piercing sword style. If there was, he would naturally comprehend and cultivate it. At a critical moment, it could save his life. Unfortunately, he couldn't find it even after rummaging through the entire spatial ring. With a smile, Chu Mu thought about it and agreed. Sometimes such important body techniques would not necessarily be recorded in words. Fortunately, he didn't have high hopes. Otherwise, he would be very disappointed. There was no body Tao mystic technique, nor was there any primordial spirit mystic technique. However, Chu Mu still obtained something good, the light crystal. The radiant crystal was a kind of energy crystal. It was similar to the illusory crystal and the pure yang crystal. It was very valuable because it was condensed from the pure power of light. The birth of a crystal was very difficult. The conditions required were very harsh. First, it had to be in a place filled with pure energy. For example, the pure yang crystal was born in the profound yang palace of the profound yang realm. The profound yang realm was filled with pure yang qi. It was then absorbed into the profound yang palace and turned into pure yang qi. The pure yang qi would then form a higher level of pure yang energy. However, it was very difficult and very little. The pure yang qi would gradually liquefy over a long period of time. Then it would solidify and form a pure yang stone. This would take a long time. After becoming a pure yang stone, it would continue to absorb pure yang qi and precipitate. Finally, it would transform into a pure yang crystal. If the pure yang crystal continued to transform, the next level would be the essence, which was the so-called soul essence. The pure yang soul essence was a high-level existence, like the 5-element soul essence. However, in the countless years of the profound sun world, it was already the limit for thousands of pure yang crystals to be born. Unless the yang qi and pure yang qi were 10 times denser, it was impossible for them to transform into pure yang soul essences. Crystals were very precious. Chu Mu used the pure yang crystal to exchange for some illusory crystal. He still needed the light crystal and the darkness crystal. Now he had a total of 20 light crystals. It was enough. He immediately used 18 light crystals to embed into the white heavenly puppet. The white heavenly puppet had already developed a trace of intelligence. After receiving the 18 light crystals, the heavenly puppet's eyes flashed. A trace of energy connected the light crystals and began to operate. A layer of white light was gradually emitted from the heavenly puppet's body. It was still very weak, but as time passed, it gradually grew stronger at an undetectable speed. Chu Mu looked at the other 2 heavenly puppets. One was a black heavenly puppet. It had a trace of intelligence, but it didn't have a corresponding crystal for the time being. The other one was a heavenly puppet with Deshang's intelligence. Chu Mu named Deshang's heavenly puppet. After obtaining the illusory crystal, he began to derive his own cultivation technique. Now, there was obvious progress. When he finished deriving his cultivation technique, he would be able to fight. There weren't many treasures in the ring of the patriarch of the Battle King sect. Normally, many third-rate forces or quasi-second-rate forces who had submitted to the Battle King sect would have offered their treasures to the patriarch of the Battle King sect. Otherwise, they would have kept their treasures in the Battle King sect. Unfortunately, after destroying the Battle King sect, there weren't any treasures. There were only 2 interspatial rings. One belonged to the second envoy of the Battle King sect, and the other belonged to the patriarch of the Battle King sect. As for the first envoy of the Battle King sect, Chu Mu let him go. Firstly, Battle King Gate's number 1 emissary had never killed true sword sex people. Secondly, he was a sword saint who was passionate about the way of the sword. Thirdly, Chu Mu being able to comprehend sword defense true meaning so quickly was directly related to him. Due to these 3 reasons, Chu Mu didn't kill him. The first envoy knew that if Chu Mu could kill the patriarch of the Battle King sect, he could easily kill him as well. Since Chu Mu didn't kill him, he wouldn't seek his own death. The enmity between the real sword sect and the Battle King sect had come to an end. However, Chu Mu had a feeling that it wouldn't end so easily. Didn't the Battle King sect have a mysterious backer? Wouldn't that backer stand up for the Battle King sect? This was obviously impossible. The sudden appearance of the Battle King sect and their actions indicated that the Battle King sect definitely had their own goals, and this goal had been terminated by the true sword sect. In the following days, Chu Mu stayed in the real sword sect and cultivated. At the same time, he was waiting for the power behind the Battle King sect to make a move. Chu Mu didn't know what kind of power was behind the Battle King sect. Because he didn't know, he couldn't take any further action. He could only wait passively. At the same time, he cultivated and did his best to increase his strength. Strength was the foundation. If one was strong enough, everything else would be as transient as smoke. Whether it was a conspiracy or an overt plot, all tricks were useless in the face of great strength. All schemers were like clowns in the face of great strength. Cultivation of the divine wilderness sword essence, basic sword techniques, cloud-piercing sword technique, Dao cutter sword technique, and 2 defensive sword techniques. Apart from that, Chu Mu also increased the cultivation of the mystic thought third transference, Yuan spirit cultivation technique, and the soul piercer Yuan spirit attack technique. As a result, each day didn't seem to be enough. Time passed very quickly, but it was also very fulfilling. Gu Wankong and the other 2 returned to the mysterious Yang sword hall to cultivate. The great elder was still in seclusion. Everything in the real sword sect was on the right track again. The 10 esoteric disciples entered the spiritual pool to cultivate and the puppet cave to fight. Their cultivation and strength began to increase rapidly. The person with the weakest cultivation was now at the early stage of the 7th sky of Nirvana realm. The strongest one had entered the early stage of the 9th sky of Nirvana realm. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. No trouble came knocking. At the same time, no one came to visit. The real sword sect was now in a rather strange period. On the 17th day, an elder suddenly reported to Chu Mu that someone had come to visit. Who? Chu Mu asked. He was very puzzled. He also knew that the destruction of the War Monarch sect wasn't the end. The faction behind the War Monarch sect wouldn't let this matter rest. Chu Mu thought about it and felt that there were 2 reasons why they hadn't made a move yet. First, the backer of the War Monarch sect didn't have time for now. Second, the backer of the War Monarch sect had already started to move. However, it wasn't in the Kanglan Empire, nor was it in the regions around the Kanglan Empire. Instead, it was in a region further away. Therefore, it would take a considerable amount of time to reach the Kanglan Empire and the real sword sect. Chu Mu naturally hoped that the longer it took, the more time the real sword sect would have. Combined with his previous analysis, there shouldn't be anyone coming to visit. I don't know his name, but I'm sure he's an expert from the Kanglan Empire. Let him in, Chu Mu said after pondering for a moment. It wasn't long before a middle-aged man in a golden robe walked in with large strides. His expression was indifferent, graceful, and magnanimous. With a single glance, It was obvious that he wasn't an ordinary person, and he was a person that truly possessed a high position. I've heard of you for a long time. This is the first time we've met. Sect Master Chu is indeed a dragon among men. The middle-aged man smiled and said to Chu Mu, "My name is Huyen Ao. I'm a member of the Kanglan Empire. May I know which king you are?" Chu Mu said, "The Tsonglan royal family's emperor's surname was Huyen. This person came from the Tsonglan royal family and was surnamed Huyen. Moreover, he wore a golden python robe." Chu Mu's thoughts turned, and he immediately had a guess. This person was a king of the Kanglan Empire.